Chapter 25. An hour later, in a village on the outskirts of Yangshuo County. Li Mu could not stop Zhang Shan in the end and could only let him come along. Zhang Shan stood at the entrance of the village and looked at Li Mu. He asked in surprise, "This is not your jurisdiction. What case are you investigating here?" Li Mu did not answer immediately. He looked at a dilapidated house at the entrance of the village. Lin Wan had lived here when she was alive. More than 10 years ago, the Lin family and the Zhao family were both wealthy local families. Their marriage was also set at that time. After that, the Lin family's business failed and gradually declined. The Zhao family's business, on the other hand, thrived and expanded by more than 10 times. In the entire Yangshuo County, they were considered a wealthy family. Zhang Shan stood beside Li Mu and muttered, "That's strange. You said you were investigating a case, but you didn't wear your uniform. You didn't let me either. You even said this case was very dangerous. What's so dangerous here?" Li Mu did not explain too much to Zhang Shan. He only said, "Don't say anything. Don't ask anything. Just stay by my side." All right. You saved me today. You have the final say." Zhang Shan shrugged and stopped talking. Li Mu walked to the dilapidated house. The yard was surrounded by a fence. Weeds had already grown in the yard and the door was locked. Clearly, no one had been here for a long time. Creak! Just as Li Mu was about to ask someone, the door of the house next door suddenly opened. An old man walked into the yard and saw two strangers standing outside. He asked curiously, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Li Mu walked forward and smiled. "Old man, I'm Lin Wan's distant cousin. May I ask if cousin Lin Wan lives here?" "You're Wan Wan's relative." The old man's expression softened when he heard that. However, he sighed and said, 2 months ago, Wan Wan disappeared. The Zhao family came to look for her, but they couldn't find her until now. No one knows where she went." Li Mu pretended to be surprised and asked, "My cousin is missing." The old man said regretfully, "If Wan Wan was still here, she would have married into the Zhao family immediately. Marrying into the Zhao family, she would have enjoyed the rest of her life. What a pity, what a pity. I don't know where she is now or if she's still alive." Li Mu didn't need to ask any more questions. He already knew what he wanted to know. The Lin family and the Zhao family did indeed have an engagement. Up until now, what he had heard from the old man was completely consistent with what Lin Wan had said. In other words, the rumor that Zhao Yong killed his fiancée in order to climb up the big tree of the county premier was most likely true. Li Mu didn't stay for long. He bid farewell to the old man and left. The most difficult thing right now was how to give Lin Wan justice. Naturally, it was impossible for her to go to the Yamen as a ghost to redress her grievances. Not to mention whether the Yamen would dare to accept the case. Even if they accepted it and reported it to the higher-ups, there was a high chance that it would be suppressed. As long as the governor was willing to protect the Zhao family, no one in the North County could touch them. At the moment, Li Mu still hadn't thought of a suitable solution. Li Mu was deep in thought as he walked. Zhang Shan followed behind him and finally couldn't help but ask, "Li Mu, when did you have a cousin? Why haven't I heard of her before?" Li Mu casually said, "I just met her." Zhang Shan's interest was piqued. "Is she pretty?" "She's all right. Compared to the boss, I can't compare to her." "That's enough. Although the boss is pretty, she only cares about cultivation. She's not the same as you. You can't always think about the boss and end up sad like Li Si." As the two of them chatted, a short man stood in front of Lin Wan's old residence in the Lin family village and asked the old man not far away, "Old man, is Miss Lin Wan home?" The old man scratched his head and said, "Why are there so many people looking for Wan Wan today?" The short man raised his eyebrows and asked, "Is there anyone else looking for her?" The old man nodded and said, "There were 2 just now. They said they were Wan Wan's cousins and just left." The short man smiled and said, "We were originally together, but we accidentally got separated 2 days ago." "Where did they go?" The old man pointed to a path on the left and said, "It's in this direction. They just left not long ago. If you chase after them now, you should be able to catch up." "Thank you, old man." The short man smiled at him and turned to chase in the direction he pointed. The old man watched his figure disappear and muttered, "His legs look quite short. How can he run so fast?" On the way back to the county, Zhang Shan finally couldn't suppress the doubts in his heart and asked Li Mu, "What case are you investigating?" Since he couldn't hide it from Zhang Shan, Li Mu simply said, "Lin Wan's disappearance case. Why do you suddenly want to investigate this?" Zhang Shan was still puzzled. "This isn't your jurisdiction. If there's a case, it's not under your jurisdiction. Moreover, there are many cases like this every year. Most of them are related to demons and ghosts. Now that the boss isn't here, how are we going to investigate? It might not necessarily be related to demons and ghosts." Li Mu asked, "Do you still remember what the old man said just now? What did he say?" "Lin Wan and Zhao Yong are going to be married. What's wrong with being married?" Zhang Shan asked blankly. Then, as if he realized something, he quickly said, "Wait, Zhao Yong? Which Zhao Yong?" Li Mu said, "The Zhao Yong you saw just now." Zhang Shan was stunned and said, "Isn't he going to be married to the county minister's daughter?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes. After all, he was a constable and was used to seeing people's hearts." Zhang Shan quickly realized something and murmured, "Lin Wan just disappeared, and Zhao Yong is going to be married to the county minister's daughter. Could it be that Lin Wan's disappearance was caused by the Zhao family?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I suspect so too." Zhang Shan thought for a moment, and his expression suddenly became serious. He said, "Don't tell me you want to get involved in this matter. Don't blame me for not reminding you. We are just constables. If we get involved in such trivial matters, we will be doing our job well. This case is not something we can handle. Not to mention us, even the county magistrate doesn't dare to get involved. If he could sit in the county government peacefully, Li Mu wouldn't be willing to risk his job or even his life." Unfortunately, justice for Lin Wan was not only related to the hurdle in Li Mu's heart, but also related to the hurdle in his life. Lin Wan was the key for him to condense the first spirit. The emotional power of a resentful spirit was equal to that of hundreds or thousands of old ladies supported by Li Mu. Time was life for Li Mu. He couldn't waste most of his time on helping old ladies cross the road. This case was extremely dangerous. Li Mu didn't want to implicate anyone. He looked at Zhang Shan and shook his head. "Go back. Don't get involved in this matter anymore." Zhang Shan was surprised and said, "You really want to get involved?" "I have to." Zhang Shan looked at him for a long time and said slowly, "Sometimes I really wonder if you are still the Li Mu I know. It seems that you have changed a lot since you died last time. You used to be the most timid person. No matter what case you encountered, you would hide as much as you could. You never took the initiative to provoke these things?" Li Mu said, "It's because I died once that I understand how to live." As his voice fell, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded behind him. "Since you have died once, why don't you cherish your life? Why do you have to touch things that you can't touch?" Chapter 26. A voice suddenly came from behind him. Li Mu turned around abruptly and saw a short and extremely ugly man standing not far behind them. He was looking at them with a sinister gaze. He was shocked. With his current spiritual sense, he actually did not know when this person had approached. It could be seen that this person must be a cultivator who had concealed his presence. His mana was not any lower than Li Mu's, and from what he had just said, Li Mu instantly guessed his identity. He did not expect the Zhao clan to be so cautious, taking action so quickly. In order to hide the matter of Lin Wan, they had actually invited a cultivator. Zhang Shan's expression was vigilant. He asked, "Who are you?" "I'm someone sent by the Zhao clan." After the dwarf appeared, Li Mu knew that today's matter could not be resolved peacefully. He silently drew the azure rainbow sword in his hand and stood in front of Zhang Shan. He said, "You go first. Go back to the yamen and find someone." Facing this dwarf, Li Mu himself was not afraid. In those 3 days he had figured out many things. The dwarf before him gave him the feeling that his strength was about the same as Han Zhe's, and was slightly weaker than Li Qing's. He had an artifact in hand and a few secret techniques that he had hidden at the bottom of his chest. As long as he did not encounter an expert of the Middle Realm, even if he could not kill the enemy, he could still protect himself. Hearing Li Mu's words, Zhang Shan turned around and ran without hesitation. If he stayed, he would only be a burden to Li Mu. After being a constable for so many years, he had been in danger many times. He knew very well what he should do at this time. Run? Where can you run to? With a flash, the dwarf appeared in front of Zhang Shan, blocking his path. Zhang Shan was unable to dodge in time. The dwarf raised his hand and struck out a yellow talisman, sticking it to Zhang Shan's chest. Afterwards, he felt that his raised foot was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. His body seemed to be imprisoned by something, and he could not even move his fingers. Not only that, but his vision and hearing seemed to have been sealed as well. Everything before him was pitch black, and he couldn't hear anything. The dwarf used the same trick again and threw a talisman at Li Mu. The talisman was extremely fast, but Li Mu was already prepared. With a light wave of the cyan rainbow sword in his hand, the Fulu was cut in half in the air. Although his cultivation level was not high, after thoroughly familiarizing himself with this body, he still had the basic skills of a constable. The dwarf did not become angry after his attack failed. Instead, he stood where he was and used a greedy gaze to look at the azure rainbow in Li Mu's hand. He could not help but lick his lips and say, "I didn't expect a minor official like you to have such a magic item in your hands. This is a great deal." Li Mu did not open his mouth. He clenched the azure rainbow sword in his hand and focused all of his attention on the dwarf. From the way he fought, this dwarf should also be a cultivator of the Tao. Taoism had a wide variety of spells and abilities, and the Fulu was even more wondrous. If he was not careful, he would fall into his trap. He had to be extremely careful. Seeing how powerful the magic item in Li Mu's hands was, the dwarf did not let down his guard and maintained a certain distance from him. If one's cultivation had not reached the middle three realms and had not cultivated a primordial spirit, there was a possibility of him being killed by a mortal. If he were to be stabbed or slashed by that sword, he would probably lose an arm or a leg today. The dwarf stared at Li Mu. Suddenly, he took out a handful of black pieces of paper from a pouch at his waist and threw them towards Li Mu's body. Taking a closer look, he discovered that these were all black paper dolls. Black fog surrounded the paper dolls, and they actually emitted a dense ghostly aura. They floated in the air and instantly surrounded Li Mu. Heretical cultivation. Li Mu became vigilant. This dwarf's methods were clearly not orthodox Taoism. Although he did not know how powerful these paper dolls were, he definitely could not let them get close to him. Li Mu had seen the monk Xuandu in action before. He knew that there was nothing more suitable than Buddhist abilities to deal with such ghostly techniques. His lips moved slightly and he chanted the Heart Sutra using the Forbidden Words ability. His body immediately emitted a golden light. When those paper dolls came into contact with the golden light, the black fog surged and boiled. They actually combusted one by one, and in the blink of an eye, they were all reduced to ashes. Buddha's light. Seeing the golden light on Li Mu's body, the dwarf retreated a few steps. Shock appeared on his face as he blurted out, "You actually know the moves of those bald donkeys." Although he looked down on those baldies, he could not deny that Buddhist abilities had a natural restraining effect on demonic ghosts and their heretical cultivation. He did not expect that the petty official before him would actually know Buddhist abilities. With this, most of his ghostly techniques would be rendered useless. He had originally thought that he would only be dealing with two petty officials. He did not expect that one of them would not be easy to deal with. Looking at Li Mu, a hint of viciousness suddenly appeared on the dwarf's face. His hands quickly formed seals and he chanted in a low voice. Li Mu could faintly hear him reciting, "God of heavenly shadow, Star Lord of blood killing, Star Lord of blood saber, Star Lord of blood poison, Star Lord of blood inspection, Star Lord of 4 stars bright, sun and moon bright." A slightly stunned expression appeared on his face. Li Mu was not unfamiliar with this incantation. This was Taoism's blood slaughter incantation. It was a technique recorded in that introductory book. The might of this technique was extremely strong. After it was executed, it could cause the blood of the target to boil instantly, killing them on the spot. Although it was a Taoism technique and possessed extremely great might, it had always been abandoned by orthodox Taoism due to its extreme viciousness. Only those with low-level heretical cultivation would cultivate it. The reason why only those with low-level heretical cultivation would cultivate it was because the incantation for this technique was extremely long. Normal abilities would only have a few incantations, and Taoism techniques would only have a few words. However, the incantation for the blood slaughter incantation had more than a dozen sentences and more than 300 words. It could not be used in a head-on battle at the same level. Under normal circumstances, this incantation would only be used for a prepared sneak attack, or to attack someone whose strength was far inferior to the user. It was very obvious that this dwarf still did not place Li Mu in his eyes. Or rather, he did not think that Li Mu had the strength to kill him. Li Mu kept the green rainbow sword unhurriedly. He stood where he was and quietly watched this dwarf recite the incantation. The incantation for the blood slaughter incantation had more than 300 words. It was impossible to finish reciting it in a single breath. If this dwarf could use a 300-word incantation to kill him today, Li Mu would eat the green rainbow sword on the spot. The dwarf stared at Li Mu. Seeing that Li Mu did not make any movements, he calmed down. After catching his breath, his lips trembled once again. Once Mu Lang arrives, thunderbolts will blast him away. Today, I have decreed that I cannot stop for long. Li Mu had long since memorized the incantation for the blood slaughter incantation. Just as this dwarf was reciting the last few sentences, Li Mu formed a hand seal unhurriedly and softly opened his mouth. Peer. Boom! Before the dwarf could finish reciting the incantation, a white thunderbolt suddenly descended from the sky, accurately striking his head. Under the thunderbolt, his body was turned into charcoal, and his soul also dissipated instantly. A gust of wind blew past, and the dwarf's corpse turned into ashes, completely disappearing from the world. Li Mu withdrew his hand seal and let out a light breath. For Taoism techniques and divine abilities, the shorter they were, the stronger they were. Many times, being short was not necessarily a bad thing. Chapter 27. After using the lightning technique to kill the dwarf, Li Mu's emotions did not fluctuate too much. It was not that he was cold-blooded and heartless, but that this person's Tao was strange and filled with an evil aura. What he cultivated was definitely not an ordinary Tao. Who knew how many lives he had killed in order to reach his current level of cultivation? Furthermore, because of the Zhao clan's murder case, he had repeatedly tried to kill him and Zhang Shan, which was enough to show his nature. Killing him could be considered as ridding the world of evil and enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. Li Mu took a deep breath. After calming himself down, he turned around and walked over to Zhang Shan, removing the talisman on his chest. Unable to move, unable to see, unable to hear. After a long while, just as Zhang Shan was feeling incomparably terrified, he suddenly discovered that his body had lightened and he had regained his mobility. He looked around before looking nervously at Li Mu. He asked, "Where's that dwarf from before?" Li Mu pointed at the black ash on the ground and said, "He wanted to kill me, but for some reason, a bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky and struck him into ashes." Zhang Shan was stunned. He asked, "That dwarf was struck to death?" Li Mu nodded. Perhaps he had done too many bad things. Even the heavens could not stand it anymore and struck him to death with a bolt of lightning. Or perhaps there was a mistake in the technique and it caused a backlash. In any case, he's already dead. You didn't see it just now. That bolt of lightning was really accurate. Zhang Shan had his back to them earlier and his body and 5 senses had been sealed. He did not know what had happened. After learning that the dwarf had suffered the wrath of the heavens, he spat out fiercely and said through gritted teeth, "Serves him right." After spitting, he looked at Li Mu and asked, "What should we do now?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I still haven't thought of a way." If Li Mu still had doubts about the Zhao clan and Lin Wan's case before, after the dwarf's appearance, That sliver of doubt had vanished. Very clearly, the Zhao clan did not completely believe that Lin Wan's soul had completely dissipated, which was why the dwarf had appeared today. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of a way. On the contrary, he already had several plans in his mind, but they weren't comprehensive enough. At this time, Zhang Shan suddenly said, "Why don't I go and see what the county magistrate thinks?" Li Mu asked in surprise, "Zhang county magistrates dare to meddle in the affairs of the Zhao family?" If the county magistrate was a good official who was not afraid of power, then this matter would be much simpler. Unfortunately, Li Mu did not know much about this county magistrate. Zhang Shan had been in the county government for a few years longer than Li Mu, so he should know the temperament of the county magistrate. "I don't dare." Zhang Shan shook his head and said, "If it was in the past, the Zhao family would be nothing. But now, the Zhao family is about to marry the commandery minister. Zhang County Magistrates is as timid as a mouse. How would he dare to meddle in the commandery minister's affairs?" Li Mu said, "Then what's the use of telling Zhang County Magistrates?" Zhang Shan said, "After being in the county government for so many years, I understand the county magistrate. Although the county magistrate is usually timid and afraid of trouble, he is still quite righteous. Even if he doesn't dare to do it himself, he can still come up with ideas for us. If it was just to kill Zhao Yong, it couldn't be easier. Li Mu could send him to hell with a thunderbolt. The difficult part was to make Zhao Yong submit to the law while also letting everyone see his true colors and giving justice to Lin Wan." Li Mu thought for a while, then looked at Zhang Shan and said, "You try first." Yangqiu County Government. Zhang County Magistrates was drinking tea in the front hall when a constable knocked on the door and came in. He looked up and found that it was Constable Zhang Shan. Zhang Shan was not very old, but he had been in the county government for a long time. He was smart and had a good eye for people. In the past few years, he had run around and done a lot of things for Zhang Shan. Zhang County Magistrates took a sip of tea and asked, "What happened to your face?" Zhang Shan looked embarrassed and said, "I accidentally fell." Zhang County Magistrates glanced at him and said, "I don't want to criticize you, but your surname is Zhang. Arrogant Zhang, but you were bullied by your wife like this. You are really a disgrace to the Zhang family." Zhang Shan blushed and quickly changed the topic. He said, "Sir, I have an important case to report to you." Zhang County Magistrates put down his teacup and asked, "What case?" Zhang Shan said, "A woman went missing in Lin's village. After investigating, I suspect that she was murdered." Zhang County Magistrate's expression became serious when he heard that there was a murder case in his district. He asked, "What happened? Tell me in detail." Zhang Shan sorted out his thoughts and said again, 2 months ago, a woman went missing in Lin's village. Her fiancé married someone else when her whereabouts were unknown. It doesn't make sense unless he knew that the woman would never come back." Zhang County Magistrates slammed the table and said angrily, "Take that man to the county government immediately. I want to interrogate him myself." Zhang Shan changed his tone and said, "But that man is from the Zhao family in Chengxi." "The Zhao family in Chengxi? Their eldest son is an official in Zhongzhou?" Zhang County Magistrates was stunned for a moment and then said, "Don't be in a hurry to arrest him. This case needs to be investigated carefully. It's not that Zhao family. It's a matter of life and death. How can we delay? Bring him to me now." Zhang County Magistrates sat up straight again and glared at Zhang Shan. He said coldly, "Bastard, so what if it's that Zhao family? A life for a life. Do you think I'll submit to power?" "Sir, you're upright and plain-spoken. Of course you won't. But this Zhao family is very rich. You mean I'll be bribed?" "That's not what I mean." "Then what are you waiting for?" "But this Zhao's future father-in-law is quite powerful. As long as it wasn't that Zhao family, he could call the shots in Yangqiu County." Zhang County Magistrates waved his sleeves and said, "I don't care who his father-in-law is. If he dares to stop me, take him back to the county government." "I'm afraid I can't." "Why?" "Because his father-in-law is the county premier." "You mean Zhao Yong?" "Yes." County Magistrate Zhang drank the tea in his cup in one gulp. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. He looked at Zhang Shan gently and waved at him, saying, "Come here. I have something to say to you." There was a continuous muffled sound in the front hall of the county government. Zhang Shan covered his buttocks, which were full of footprints, and shouted, "Sir, please spare my life. Please spare my life." Zhang County Magistrate's chest heaved up and down. He pointed at him and scolded, "Get out. Get out of here right now. Get as far away as you can. I don't want to see you for the next few days." Zhang Shan scrambled to the door. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him. "Stop!" Zhang County Magistrate stood in the hall and asked, "Is this true?" Zhang Shan nodded solemnly and said, "I've investigated it myself. It's absolutely true. If you don't believe me, you can send someone to Lin's village to ask." Zhang County Magistrate was silent for a moment. He put on his official hat and said lightly, "Miss Lin will invite her close friends to Yangqiu County in 2 days. Her friends are the daughter of the county premier. Find 2 people to protect them. If anything goes wrong, I'll cut off your head. Do you hear me?" Zhang Shan stood up straight and said seriously, "Yes, sir. If you heard me clearly, then get the hell out of here right now." Zhang Shan ran out of the front hall, panting. Li Mu stood at the door of the duty room. He saw that although Zhang Shan was covered in footprints, the smile on his face reached his ears. He asked in surprise, "Did Zhang County Magistrates agree?" Zhang Shan shook his head and said, "No, he even beat me up." "Then why are you so happy?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Forget it. I'll use my own method." Zhang Shan waved his hand. "No need." Li Mu raised his eyebrows. "Do you have a way?" Zhang Shan smiled mysteriously. "I have my own plan." Chapter 28. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. If they wanted to deal with Zhao Yong, they had to understand him first. Li Mu and Zhang Shan had a preliminary understanding of Zhao Yong through squatting near the Zhao family and investigating both openly and secretly. The Zhao family was considered a relatively upper-class country squire in Yangqiu County. As the only son of the Zhao family, Zhao Yong did not get into the bad habits of the ordinary hedonistic sons. He neither bullied the kind nor took advantage of the common people. On the contrary, he was diligent and studious. He was strict with himself and rarely went out except for studying at home. If Li Mu didn't know what kind of heartless things he had done, he might have admired this kind of person who was so self-disciplined to the extreme. Zhang Shan had a green foxtail in his mouth and said, "This kind of person is actually the most terrifying. They are really ruthless when they are ruthless. They are ruthless to themselves and even more ruthless to others." Fortunately, he also has needs. After 3 days of squatting and stalking, Li Mu and Zhang Shan discovered some unusual things about Zhao Yong. Zhao Yong went to the brothel almost every day for the past 3 days. The frequency was almost catching up with Li Si. Li Mu was puzzled and asked, "Could the news you heard be wrong? Didn't you say that Zhao Yong is diligent and studious, is strict with himself and rarely goes out of the house?" "You don't understand." Zhang Shan spat out the green bristles in his mouth and said, "He's about to marry the prefectural minister's daughter. In the future, he won't have the chance to come to a place like this. Of course, he wants to indulge himself before he loses his freedom. Moreover, I heard that the prefectural minister's daughter is very, very pretty. Otherwise, Zhao Yong wouldn't have a chance. I'm afraid Zhao Yong knows this too, so he wants to indulge himself before he gets married." His tone changed as he looked at Li Mu and said with a smile, "What do you think the daughter of the prefectural minister would think if she saw this scene?" The reason why Zhang County magistrates did not dare to touch the Zhao family was because of their relationship with the county premier. Without this relationship, the Zhao family was nothing in Yangqiu County. Li Mu admitted that he was starting to have a whole new level of respect for Zhang Shan. This fat man's head wasn't just filled with money. Zhang Shan looked at the entrance of the brothel and said with a smile, "Zhao Yong will appear in a quarter of an hour. There is still some time. Why don't we make a bet?" On the streets of Yangqiu County, 2 women were walking together. A slender woman turned around and asked, Will that young Master Zhao appear today? Zhang Shan, who was dressed in plain clothes, looked at the slender woman and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Mississippi. I've already asked around. That young Master Zhao will go out for a walk at this time every day. You'll see him in a while." The slender woman looked at the other woman beside her and said with a smile, "Sister Chen, don't worry. Although I've never seen young Master Zhao, I've heard that he's handsome and hardworking. He's an upright person. In short, you'll know when you see him in a while." Chen Miao Miao only smiled shyly, but her expression was full of anticipation. Which girl didn't yearn for love? She was also full of longing for her future husband. Therefore, even though she wasn't very familiar with Zhang County Magistrate's daughter, when she received her invitation, she thought about it for a short period of time and agreed. This trip was called a sightseeing trip, but in fact, she wanted to see young Master Zhao in advance. As for Yangqiu County Magistrate's obvious behavior of wanting to curry favor with her father, the county premier of North County, she pretended not to see it. The two of them were just taking what they needed. Li Mu was also dressed in plain clothes. He walked a few steps behind the three of them and occasionally raised his head to take a look. Of the two women in front, the slender one was called Zhang Yi. She was the daughter of Zhang County Magistrates. The other woman with a voluptuous figure was the daughter of the county premier. She was invited by Zhang Yi to come to Yangqiu County for sightseeing. Saying that she had a voluptuous figure was Li Mu's conservative word. In fact, her body could already be called severely obese. Even if she raised her head, Li Mu couldn't see her neck. If Li Qing's figure was used as a standard, this daughter of the county premier was at least 4 times Li Qing's. This also solved a doubt in Li Mu's heart. The status of the county premier's daughter was very noble. There should be countless suitors. Why would she lower herself to marry into the Zhao family? Now, the doubt in his heart was finally solved. Other than Zhao Yong, there probably weren't many people who would be willing to marry into the county premier's family. According to Li Mu and Zhang Shan's plan, the daughter of the county premier would be spoiled since she was young. She was arrogant and had specially come to Yangqiu County to peek at her future husband. If she saw Zhao Yong visiting a brothel, she would fall out with him on the spot. This marriage would naturally be called off. In the past few days, they had already figured out Zhao Yong's work and rest habits. 2 hours after lunch was when he would come out to have fun. As expected, the few of them went to a tea house. Not long after they sat down, Zhang Shan pointed at the street below and said, "Ladies, that's the young master of the Zhao family." When Chun Miao Miao heard this, she quickly got up and looked down from the window. She saw a handsome young man walking across the street and walked straight into the loft opposite. Below the loft, a few ladies with heavy makeup leaned against the railing at the door. They waved the handkerchief in their hands and laughed. "Sir, young master, come in and have some fun." Chun Miao Miao's expression was a little awkward. She glanced at Zhang Shan and said, "Could you have mistaken him for someone else?" "No," Zhang Shan said firmly. "We saw him at the Zhao family 2 days ago. We couldn't have mistaken him for someone else." Zhang Yi stood up and tried to smooth things over. She said, "You must have mistaken him for someone else. Young Master Zhao isn't that kind of person." Chun Miao Miao forced a smile on her face and said, "He's a man. It's normal for him to go to these brothels. Moreover, we're not married yet." Li Mu and Zhang Shan looked at each other and saw the astonishment in their eyes. The development of the matter was not what they had expected. The temperament of the county deputy's daughter was completely different from what they had imagined. She actually forgave Zhao Yong so easily? After seeing Zhao Yong enter the brothel, Chun Miao Miao's mood fell. Zhang Shan counted the time. At a certain moment, he stood up and said, "Ladies, we've finished the tea. Let's go down for a walk." Chun Miao Miao had lost the slightest interest in sightseeing. Zhang Yi stood up and said, "I know a good rouge shop nearby. Let me take my sister to have a look." Chun Miao Miao was not in the mood to sightsee, but she could not reject Zhang Yi's hospitality. She could only follow her downstairs. When they walked to the street, they happened to see Zhao Yong walking out of the brothel. A coquettish lady held Zhao Yong's hand and said softly, "Young Master Zhao, other than that pair of bracelets, I also have my eyes on a jade pendant." Zhao Yong touched a perky part of her body and said, "If you serve me well tonight, I'll buy it for you tomorrow." The coquettish lady moaned and said coquettishly, "Then I'll wait for you tonight." After Zhao Yong was done with his pleasure, he left the brothel and walked to the street. He saw an extremely fat lady. When he saw this lady, it reminded him of the county deputy's daughter. When he thought about how he would have to live with this kind of woman for the rest of his life, Zhao Yong's heart felt uncomfortable. He looked at this lady with a disgusted gaze and turned to leave. Chun Miao Miao was keenly aware of the disgust in Zhao Yong's eyes. Her face turned pale and she said to Zhang Yi, "I want to walk alone." Zhang Yi said worriedly, "Let me accompany you." "No need." Chun Miao Miao shook her head and said to the other guards in the distance, "You don't have to follow me." Seeing Chun Miao Miao leave alone, Li Mu shook his head and sighed, "What a kind lady." As the county deputy's daughter, Chun Miao Miao's character surprised Li Mu. She was gentle and had a sense of inferiority that anyone could see. Of course, Chun Miao Miao did not fall out with Zhao Yong. His and Zhang Shan's foolproof plan had also failed. Plan A has failed. Zhang Shan sighed and said, "It seems like we can only carry out Plan B." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "When did you have Plan B?" "I didn't want to use this trump card." Zhang Shan sighed and said, "Now it seems that I can't use it." Chapter 29. Yangqiu County, Main Street. A coquettish woman followed a young man out of a brothel. She took out a pair of bracelets from her sleeves and stuffed them into his arms. She said, "Pawn this to buy wine. Come tomorrow and I'll give you a jade pendant. If you like it, wear it. If you don't like it, pawn it too." The man did not accept the jade bracelets. He waved his hand and said, "Wear it for fun." Seeing him walk into the street, the coquettish woman hurriedly asked, "Then will you come tomorrow?" The man turned his head and said lightly, "Depends on the situation." Li Si had just walked out of the brothel when two people pressed down on his shoulders. He looked back and saw Zhang Shan and Li Mu. He asked in confusion, "What are you doing?" Zhang Shan said solemnly, "The organization has a very important mission for you." "What mission?" "Go save a woman." "Tell me the details." "Make that woman fall in love with you?" Li Si waved his hand and said, "I've never touched love. Find someone else." Zhang Shan grabbed his arm and said, "This involves a murder case. Only you can help us now." "I, Li Si, have touched everything in my life except love." Li Si said firmly, "I've never done anything that goes against my principles. You can think of another way." Zhang Shan suddenly asked, "Do you still remember how Qingqing left you?" Li Si's body trembled. He looked at him with red eyes and his breathing gradually became heavier. "There was a woman whose experience was very similar to yours." Zhang Shan continued, "The difference was that Qingqing left you because of money. But that woman's fiancé, for his own future and to marry the county minister's daughter, did not hesitate to cruelly kill her and throw her body into the wilderness. Not only that, that bastard even asked a cultivator to scatter her soul. What we need to do now is to bring that bastard to justice." Zhang Shan looked into Li Si's eyes and asked, "Such a poor girl. Are you really not willing to help her?" The veins on Li Si's forehead bulged and his eyes were bloodshot. He closed his eyes for a long time before opening them and asking, "Speak. What do you want me to do?" Li Si had already left. Li Mu looked at Zhang Shan and asked, "Can he do it?" "Remove the should." Zhang Shan said with absolute certainty, "The women in Yangqiu County, no matter if they are young girls or young married women, from the age of 18 to the age of 80, there is no one that he can't handle. When he goes to the brothel, those women are willing to pay for him to come back again." Since the last illusion incident, Li Mu had a whole new level of respect for Li Si. It was not that he doubted him. It was just that he could not figure out what skill Li Si, who was only above average in appearance and looked somewhat dispirited and depressed, had to be able to gain the favor of so many women at the same time. If he could learn Li Si's skill, he would not have to worry about not being able to obtain desire. After all, this was related to his life. He had to find a chance to ask Li Si for advice. Chun Miao Miao walked on the street in a daze. She had never thought that this trip to Yangqiu County would have such an ending. Her future husband's nature was so low. She thought that he must have taken a fancy to her father's power and agreed to marry her. She was too naive. How could there be anyone in the world who would like a woman like her? Thinking of this, her heart was filled with sorrow. Bang! She only cared about walking with her head down and accidentally bumped into someone. Chen Miao Miao's body only trembled, but that person was sent flying and fell to the ground. Chen Miao Miao looked flustered. Just as she was about to go forward and ask, the young man she bumped into quickly got up from the ground and ran to her side. He asked with concern, "Miss, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Chen Miao Miao shook her head. When she looked at the young man, she was stunned. Because of her figure, other than her parents, everyone looked at her with more or less a strange gaze. Their eyes were filled with surprise, ridicule, and disdain. However, none of them looked at her like the young man in front of her. Anxiety, worry, and concern. Other than that, there was only clarity. Seeing that she was fine, the young man smiled and asked, "My name is Li Shan. May I know your name?" Under the circumstances of not knowing her identity, no one had ever spoken to her in such a tone. Chen Miao Miao lowered her head and whispered, Chen Miao Miao." 3 days later, at the entrance of the county yamen, Zhang Yi looked at Chen Miao Miao in surprise and asked, "Sister Chen, are you leaving so early?" Chen Miao Miao's face was full of reluctance, but she still shook her head and said, 3 days is already very long. If I'm any later, my father will send someone to pick me up." Zhang Yi said regretfully, "After this farewell, I don't know when we will meet again." Chen Miao Miao suddenly held her hand and said, Thank you." Zhang Yi was puzzled and asked, "Thank me for what?" Chen Miao Miao smiled and said, "Because of you, I can come here and see him." Him? Zhang Yi was stunned and asked, "Is it Zhao Yong?" "No." Chen Miao Miao shook her head and said, "He's a very special person. Only he didn't dislike my looks and figure. He said that only this kind of me can fill his heart, and he can't hold anyone else. He really likes me." Only then did Zhang Yi understand why Chen Miao Miao left early and returned late these days and didn't let her accompany her. It turned out that she was secretly meeting another man. She looked at Chen Miao Miao and said, "Sister Chen, don't be fooled by anyone." Chen Miao Miao looked down at her figure and smiled. She said, "I'm not like you. Why would I be fooled by him?" Zhang Yi looked back at Zhang Shan and Li Mu. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Chen Miao Miao took a deep breath and said, "When I go back this time, I'm going to tell my father that I won't marry Zhao Yong. I'm going to wait for him. He said that after 3 years, when his mourning period is over, he will come to my house to propose marriage." Zhang Yi sighed and said, "I really hope that Sister Chen will meet the right person for you." After Chen Miao Miao left, Li Mu and Zhang Shan also learned from Zhang Yi that after she went back, she would cancel the marriage with the Zhao family. Li Mu sighed in his heart. When a woman was in love, her IQ would indeed plummet. Li Si only used a fake name and a fake identity to deceive her heart. Zhang Yi sighed and said, "I really don't know if what we did was wrong or right." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "If she really married a beast like Zhao Yong, it would be the greatest tragedy. What we did was a good thing." Zhang Yi looked up at him and said in surprise, "Li Mu, you've changed?" "Ah." Li Mu looked puzzled. "What changed?" Zhang Yi looked at him and said, "The old you wouldn't have said such words." Li Mu smiled and said, "People always change. After dying once, I also thought through some things. You have indeed changed. You've become more responsible." Zhang Yi looked at him with appreciation and said, "When this case is over, I'll go to my father to ask for your reward." After Zhang Yi left, only Li Mu and the other two were left. Li Si leaned against the wall, a grass root in his mouth. He looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, thinking about something. Li Mu leaned against the wall beside him and asked, "How did you do it?" "What? Make a woman like you in 3 days. You want to learn?" "I want to learn." Li Si spat out the grass root in his mouth and said, "A wolf's heart can only be exchanged for a dog's lungs. The best way to make a woman give her heart to you is for you to give her your heart as well. Heart can only be exchanged with heart. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "You gave your heart to Miss Chen?" Li Si said, "I gave my heart to every girl." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Then your heart is really worthless." Li Si pulled the corner of his mouth and said self-deprecatingly, "My heart is worthless in the first place?" Li Mu was silent for a while, then patted him on the shoulder and said, "Some people are better off not seeing each other, and some people are better off missing each other." Li Si suddenly looked at him and said, "Miss is right. Li Mu, you've really changed. A virgin who hasn't even held a woman's hand is actually saying these things to me." Li Mu was too lazy to argue with him and asked, "What do you plan to do in 3 years? Are you really going to marry her at the county minister's residence?" "She's a good girl." A smile appeared on Li Si's face and he shook his head. "I'm not worthy." Chapter 30. North County, County City. In the county premier's manor, a middle-aged man who was drinking tea in the hall stood up and asked in surprise, "Why is she not getting married just like that?" The young man who was half kneeling on the ground raised his head and said, "Sir, Miss went to Yangqiu County this time to play. Actually, she wanted to meet Zhao Yong first. However, she didn't expect that Zhao Yong's nature was so different from his reputation. He stayed in the brothel every day and came out in less than 15 minutes. The middle-aged man put down his teacup and said, 15 minutes is not short." The young man said, 15 minutes is from the time he entered the brothel to the time he came out. He might have taken a bath. That's a little short." The young man thought for a moment and said, "Miss met a man in Yangqiu County and seemed to have fallen in love with him." "Oh." The middle-aged man stroked the short beard on his chin and said, "No wonder she was so happy when she came back this time. How is that man?" The young man said, "He's very good to Mississippi. When Miss was with him, she didn't do anything inappropriate. I saw that Miss was happy, so I didn't stop her. As long as Miao Miao is happy, it's fine." The middle-aged man shook his head and said with some regret that Zhao Yong has a fire elemental body, which is compatible with Miao Miao's physique. I searched for a long time before I found him. If the two of them were together, it would make up for Miao Miao's congenital defect and let her walk on the path of cultivation. What a pity. After saying that, he changed the topic and asked, "What's the identity of that man? Is he married?" The young man said, "Yangqiu County Government Constable Li Si. He's not married. When he was with Miss, he hid his real name and identity. He even made a 3-year agreement with Mississippi." "Sir, how should we deal with this person?" The middle-aged man said, "Since Miao Miao made a 3-year agreement with him, we'll wait for him for 3 years." The young man raised his head and asked, "If he doesn't come in 3 years?" The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "He made the agreement himself. When the time comes, it's not up to him whether he comes or not." The young man asked again, "Then the Zhao family?" The middle-aged man said nonchalantly, "Miao Miao already has someone she likes. Let's forget about the Zhao family. Send someone to inform them. Also, tell the county magistrate to take care of Li Si for the next 2 years. It doesn't matter if he's cultivating or not. It's not easy for Miao Miao to meet someone she likes." The young man thought for a moment and asked worriedly, "Sir, could that person be plotting something?" "Plot?" The middle-aged man smiled and said, "So what if he's plotting? As long as Miao Miao likes him, as long as he can make Miao Miao happy, wealth, power, whatever he wants, this official will give him." Yangqiu County, Zhao Manor. "You didn't find it?" Zhao Yong listened to the servant's report and frowned. He said angrily, "That damn dwarf, did he take the money and run away?" He kept pacing in the room. Although he did it secretly and no one knew, he still hired a master who knew Taoism to keep an eye on the Lin family village just in case. He did not expect that the master never appeared again after taking the deposit. Zhao Yong could not help but wonder if he had met a swindler. Just as he was feeling irritated, another servant rushed in and said, "Young master, master and madam want you to come out. Someone from the county minister's manor is here." Hearing that someone from the county minister's manor was here, Zhao Yong hurried out. However, There were no guests in the front hall. Instead, his parents were standing there in a daze and their faces were pale. Zhao Yong looked at them and asked doubtfully, "Father, mother, what's wrong? Where are the people from the county minister's manor?" The patriarch of the Zhao family slapped him hard on the face and said with gritted teeth, "Bastard, what have you done?" Zhao Yong covered his face and was stunned. "What did I do?" Master Zhao said with a sullen face. "Your marriage with the county minister's daughter has been cancelled." "What?" Zhao Yong's expression changed drastically. Although he had heard that the county minister's daughter was famous for being ugly, for the sake of his future, he gritted his teeth and accepted it. He even killed his original fiancée because of it. Now that he was told that the marriage was cancelled, how could he accept it? Zhao Yong was shocked and anxious. He asked, "Why?" Master Zhao threw a letter at his face and said, "The county minister's daughter came to Yangqiu County to play 2 days ago and saw that you were hanging around the brothel every day. When she returned, she told the county minister that your marriage was cancelled." Zhao Yong's body trembled. He seemed to have thought of something and his face turned completely pale. The woman looked regretful and said, "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't." Master Zhao asked, "Wouldn't what?" The woman avoided his eyes and shook her head. "Nothing." The patriarch of the Zhao family had a suspicious look on his face as he asked, "Are you hiding something from me? How is that possible?" The woman laughed dryly and changed the topic. "Let the marriage be cancelled. I heard that the county minister's daughter is fat and extremely ugly. Marrying her is an injustice to our Yong-er. Come, master, have a cup of tea and calm down." Just as she finished speaking, a servant ran in from outside and said, "Master, madam, it's not good. Someone from the county government came and said that the young master was involved in a murder case. They want to take him to the county government for questioning." Bang! The teacup in the woman's hand fell and shattered into pieces. Zhao Yong's body went limp and he collapsed to the ground. County Magistrate Zhang knew about the cancellation of the marriage between Zhao Yong and the prefectural premier's daughter earlier than the Zhao family because the people from the prefectural premier's mansion went to the county yamen first after arriving at Yangqiu County. As soon as they left the Zhao family, Zhang County magistrates sent people to arrest Zhao Yong. The county government was only worried about the county minister's involvement in Lin Wan's case. Now that the Zhao family had nothing to do with the county minister's residence, Zhang County magistrates had nothing to worry about. In the court, Zhao Yong refused to admit it and said loudly, "I didn't kill anyone. Wan is my fiancée. How could I kill her?" Zhao Yong's mother stood behind him and cried, "Master, I'm innocent. Wan is just missing." Zhang County magistrates looked at her lightly and said, "We have found Miss Lin Wan's body." The woman was stunned for a moment and then cried, "My poor daughter-in-law, you died so miserably. Master, you must make a decision for us and arrest the murderer." Zhang County magistrates slammed the gavel and said loudly, "Zhao Yong, you really didn't kill Lin Wan." Zhao Yong knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Master, I'm innocent." Zhang County magistrates looked at him and said, "Raise your head and see who she is." Zhao Yong raised his head and a woman's face slowly appeared in front of him. A ghost. Zhao Yong's face turned pale and he fainted. The woman hugged the leg of the head of the Zhao family and said mournfully, "Master, save Yong-er. We only have one child. He is a human life and so are others. I didn't teach him well." 2 lines of tears flowed down the middle-aged man's face. He looked at Zhao Yong and whispered, "You reap what you sow. Yong-er, be a good person in your next life." Zhao Yongji's mother's body trembled. She looked at Li Mu, Zhang Shan and the other 2 with an extremely venomous and resentful gaze. Then she blacked out and passed out. Disgust and resentment were all evil feelings. Zhao Yong deserved to die, and his mother was not a good person either. Li Mu did not show any mercy to such people. After Li Mu invited Lin Wan's spirit, there was no suspense in the case. Interrogating Zhao Yong was just a normal procedure. According to the laws of the Great Zhou, murderers had to pay with their lives. Zhang County magistrates waved his brush and immediately sentenced Zhao Yong to death. Although the county magistrate did not have the power to directly sentence a person to death, he only needed to send the case to the governor's office. After a final review, the sentence would be carried out. The Great Zhou's counties were autonomous. The central county's imperial court usually did not interfere with the county's affairs. All matters of the county were decided by the governor. Given the distance between Yangqiu County and the county capital, a round trip would take at least 3 days. From the time Zhao Yong was sentenced to death to the governor's review and return of the case file, it only took 2 days. After 3 days, Zhao Yong would be executed at the entrance of the market. Yangqiu County was not big, and the Zhao family had some reputation in the county. On the day of Zhao Yong's execution, the streets of Yangqiu County were empty. Zhang County magistrates personally supervised the execution. The executioner was already waiting on the stage. The knife in his hand was not an ordinary weapon. With one slash, besides the head falling to the ground, the criminal's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls would also be destroyed. This was to prevent the criminal from becoming a malicious spirit after death and continuing to wreak havoc. Zhang County magistrates threw down an order and said in a deep voice, "The time has come. Execute." The knife flashed, and Zhao Yong's head rolled to the ground. Amidst the shocked cries of the crowd at the entrance of the market, Zhang County magistrates looked at the empty space beside him and said apologetically, "Miss Lin, this is all I can do. Zhao Yong is already dead. I hope you won't harbor any resentment in your heart in the future and walk the path of evil and harm the world. Thank you, sir. Lin Wan will remember your teachings." In the empty space, only her voice could be heard, but her figure could not be seen. "I'm ashamed. I can't accept your thanks. If you want to thank someone, thank Li Mu and the others." Zhang County magistrates shook his head and turned to old Wang, who was standing behind him and dozing off. He said, "Don't sleep anymore. Let someone clean up the ground." On the day of Zhao Yong's execution, something else happened in Yangqiu County that caused a lot of discussion. On this day, the head of the Zhao family sold his mansion, shop, dismissed his servants, and donated all his family assets. He moved out of Yangqiu County and disappeared. Master Zhao is a good man. It's a pity that he gave birth to such an animal. Sigh, he even gives porridge to beggars during festivals. What a sin. In a tea house on the street, the people were idle and discussing. A tall and thin man leaned against the door of the tea house and asked, "Those constables are quite brave. What are their names?" The waiter thought for a moment and said, "Li Mu, Zhang Shan, Li Si. I think it's those few. Thank you." The tall and thin man nodded and turned to disappear into the crowd. Chapter 31. Today was the day of Zhao Yong's execution. Considering that the beheading scene would be very bloody, Li Mu did not go to watch. Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan seemed to have gone to watch the show. When Wan Wan came back, her little face was pale. She saw Li Mu eating duck blood, which was rare for her to not come over. She covered her mouth, turned around, and ran away. Lu Hanyan's complexion was better than her. She only looked at Li Mu with a slightly strange gaze. She walked to Li Mu's side and asked, "I heard from the constables that you took on the case and planned to have Zhao Yong executed to bring justice to Miss Lin?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "They were my 2 colleagues. I only contributed a little." These were his heartfelt words. It was also the truth. He took on Lin Wan's case, but without the help of Zhang Shan and Li Si, Zhao Yong would not have been executed so quickly. Lu Hanyan only knew that Li Mu was a constable. She did not know that he was such a courageous constable. After the Zhao family became the county premier, no one dared to provoke them in Yangqiu County. Even the county magistrate had to show them some respect. A mere constable actually sent the young master of the Zhao family to the execution ground. How much courage did this require? This made her look at Li Mu in a new light. She stood in the courtyard and seemed to be confused. She asked, "Aren't you afraid of the Zhao family and the county premier?" In order to maintain the image of a dying person in front of Lu Hanyan, Li Mu said fearlessly, "Why should I be afraid? Anyway, I don't have much time left to live. Before I die, if I can kill a few more beasts and do more good for the people, my life will not be in vain. Li Mu, hurry up and come out. The county magistrate has rewarded us with 2 months of salary. Lu Hanyan's face was filled with admiration when Zhang Shan walked in with a face full of smiles. When he saw the unfamiliar lady in the courtyard, he was stunned for a moment before asking, This is Lady Lu, my neighbor, Li Mu replied. He seemed to be looking at Zhang Shan, but in fact he was looking at Lin Wan behind Zhang Shan. She did not show herself in front of others. Zhang Shan and Lu Hanyan could not see her. I'll go back first. Seeing that there were strangers in Li Mu's house, Lu Hanyan was about to leave. Before she left, she thought of something and said, I know an old doctor who specializes in treating difficult and complicated diseases. Do you want to ask him to take a look at you? Maybe he will have a way. When Zhang Shan heard this, he looked at Li Mu and said in surprise, Li Mu, you're sick. What kind of illness? When did it happen? How come I've never heard of it? Lu Hanyan was stunned for a moment. Then she turned to look at Li Mu. Although she saw Li Mu fainting and vomiting blood with her own eyes, other than those 2 times, he looked no different from an ordinary person. Zhang Shan's words aroused the suspicion in her heart. Li Mu's mind was not on Zhang Shan and Lu Hanyan at all. He did not even hear what they were saying. All of his attention was on Lin Wan. Zhao Yong has been executed. Thank you, benefactor, for giving justice to Lin Wan. Lin Wan knelt on the ground and respectfully kowtowed 3 times to Li Mu. At this time, in Li Mu's eyes, a dazzling red light suddenly appeared on her body. Whether it was a human or a demon ghost, the stronger the strength, the stronger the power of emotions. Li Mu immediately used the guiding technique. In an instant, he felt that his body was filled with something. Lin Wan's gratitude and joy continued to pour into him. If his body was a pond, Zhang Shan's joy was like a ladle of water. The power of emotions of the Yin spirit Zhangwang clan was like a trickle, and Lin Wan's power of emotions was like the yellow river bursting its banks. Li Mu wanted to stop the guiding technique, but he found that he could not. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. When Li Mu woke up again, he found himself lying on his bed. Lu Hanyan stood in front of the bed with a worried expression. Zhang Shan was walking around the room. Lin Wan, who was hiding in the corner, was the first to find that he was awake. Joy quickly appeared on her face. Li Mu supported his body and wanted to sit up. Lu Hanyan saw him and hurriedly helped him up. Are you okay? Her expression was worried and guilty. She was worried about his body. She was guilty because she suspected that he was pretending to be sick. Li Mu shook his head and said, I'm fine. I'm used to fainting. Zhang Shan walked over with a complicated expression and asked, You really only have half a year. Li Mu said, If I'm lucky, I might not die. Does the boss know? Yes. Zhang Shan opened his mouth and lowered his head in the end. The boss will definitely have a way. Zhang Shan and Lu Hanyan's bodies were filled with grief, but Li Mu didn't absorb it. He just smiled and said, You guys go back first. I want to rest alone for a while. After Zhang Shan and Lu Hanyan left, Lin Wan walked over from the corner and muttered, Benefactor, your body? Li Mu smiled and said, I'm fine. Ghosts belong to spirit bodies and were very sensitive to souls. The 7 spirits belonged to the corporeal body, so they couldn't see the problem with his body. They only instinctively felt that he was easier to approach than people with 7 spirits. Until now, Li Mu still couldn't figure out how that evil ghost had seen that his 7 spirits were all gone. He stopped thinking about things that he couldn't figure out and looked at Lin Wan again. Zhao Yong is already dead. What do you plan to do next? Go to Yudu? Lin Wan nodded and said, That's the place I should go. Li Mu nodded and said, Go. I'll be a cow or a horse in my next life and repay your kindness. Lin Wan kowtowed to him 3 times and her figure faded away. After Lin Wan left, the entire room became incomparably silent. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the bed with his 5 hearts facing the sky. He could feel the surging joy in his body. A hint of excitement appeared on his face. He closed his eyes and guided his magic power to circulate. He muttered softly, 9 cycles of white qi. Control the spirits and evil spirits. Heavenly beasts guard the door. Delicate girls guard the pass. 7 spirits and softness are at peace with me. Don't act rashly. Look at the source of form. After a moment, his eyes suddenly opened and he said, Corpse dog, condense. As the word condense fell, the countless red lights in his body all disappeared into his body. At the same time, Li Mu felt as if there was something extra in his body, but it also felt like there was nothing. However, the magic power in his body had increased several times in that instant. This meant that his first spirit had been condensed. The function of the corpse dog was to be alert. It could allow him to detect approaching danger under any circumstances. Not only that, the increased magic power in his body when he condensed his spirit also allowed him to cast spells that he couldn't cast before. Li Mu thought for a moment and formed a seal with one hand. He said softly, Heaven and earth are limitless. The universe borrows the power. The power is born from the heart, endlessly growing. Li Mu still couldn't control the Tai Sin culling demon-slaying protective spell. If he forcefully cast it, he would definitely suffer a backlash. Speaking of those Taoist magic arts that he could not master for the time being, in most cases, even if the hand gestures were correct, Li Mu had to finish chanting one or several sentences before he could feel it. But for the Tao Te Ching, he could not even read a single word. It was as if there was something that could see through his thoughts. Nothing happened when he chanted the word Dao with the help of the handprint. However, if Li Mu thought that Dao can be explained and tried again, he would immediately suffer a backlash. It was extremely strange. Li Mu didn't dare to try this for now. He formed another hand gesture and said softly, Army. Clang. Suddenly, the crisp sound of a sword rang in his ears. At the same time, the azure rainbow sword that Li Mu had placed on the table was suddenly unsheathed. It floated in the air and buzzed incessantly. Li Mu's mind moved and the sword drew a sword flower in the air. Then, following Li Mu's will, it moved forward and backward, left and right. Li Mu reached out and grasped it in his hand. The first word of the 9 syllables mantra was thunder magic. The second word was used to control weapons. Taoism had a remarkable ability called summon, come, and go. As the name suggested, this remarkable ability could control objects remotely. It required one to be at the soul condensation realm to cast it. As for controlling flying swords and magic treasures, only cultivators at the 3rd realm and above could grasp it. The existence of the second word of the mantra directly helped Li Mu close the gap in this realm. The only flaw was that with his current realm, controlling the magic weapon consumed a lot of magic power. Just a moment ago, he felt that the magic power in his body was completely drained, and his head was a little dizzy. Li Mu took the opportunity to lie on the bed, and soon fell into a deep sleep. At a certain moment, Li Mu suddenly woke up from his sleep. He jumped up from the bed and caught a figure that was sneaking up on him while he was sleeping. He pressed the figure onto the bed. All of this was done instinctively. After catching the person, Li Mu felt that something was wrong. The place he held with one hand was soft and smooth, while the place he pressed with the other hand was round and perky. Li Mu took a closer look and realized that the person he pressed onto the bed was actually Lu Hanyan. Li Mu was shocked and hurriedly explained, I'm sorry, I thought it was a sneak attack. Lu Hanyan was pressed onto the bed in a humiliating position. She struggled but couldn't break free. She said angrily, Hurry and let go. You're hurting me. Chapter 32. In Li Mu's bedroom, Lu Hanyan sat in front of the bed. She frowned and gently rubbed her wrist that was grabbed by Li Mu and was now a little bruised. Li Mu looked embarrassed and explained, I'm sorry, Lady Lu. I didn't mean to. Forget it. It was normal for constables to be vigilant. Lu Hanyan pointed to a soup bowl on the table and said, Wan Wan is sick, so I made some chicken soup for her. I also brought you a bowl. You're weak, so drink it to nourish your body. Thank you, Lady Lu. This was a normal interaction between neighbors, so Li Mu didn't refuse. Li Mu picked up the bowl and drank the soup. Lu Hanyan sat on the side and waited for him to finish before taking the soup bowl back. Li Mu took a sip and found that the chicken soup actually tasted good. He originally thought that Lu Hanyan was the kind of girl who didn't do household chores. He didn't expect that, in addition to singing well, she could also make good soup. After drinking a few mouthfuls, Li Mu raised his head and asked, "What's wrong with Wanwan?" Li Mu was still very concerned about the little girl who often ate and drank at his place. "Isn't it because she's timid?" Lu Hanyan breathed a sigh of relief and said helplessly, "In the morning, she was still pestering me to watch the show. In the end, when she really saw the scene, she was scared. When she came back, she started to have a fever. If she doesn't get better tomorrow, I'm afraid we'll have to call a doctor. Unfortunately, she doesn't like to drink medicine." According to Lu Hanyan's description, it should be the first time that Wanwan saw an execution. Her mind should be frightened. In this case, ordinary medicine would have very little effect. However, Taoist Fulu was very effective in calming the mind. Li Qing once gave him such a talisman. In addition to exorcising ghosts and warding off evil spirits, it also had the effect of calming the mind. Unfortunately, when he encountered the evil spirit, he used up all his magical power. After Lu Hanyan left, Li Mu also walked out of the house. Now that his first spirit had been formed, his mana had increased and he could be considered to have taken a peek at the door of cultivation. He had the ability to write some simple Fulu. Fulu was an important branch of the Tao sect's divine abilities and spells. It mainly used talismans to communicate with the heavens and the earth. It had the effect of curing illnesses, dispelling disasters, summoning deities and exorcising ghosts, and suppressing devils and demons. Low-level talismans could cure illnesses and eliminate disasters, as well as calm the mind. High-level talismans, on the other hand, had great power that did not lose to Taoist techniques. Among the 6 Taoist sects, the Fulu school also had a place. Li Mu went out and bought a brush, ink, cinnabar, and yellow paper. He was ready to draw the first Fulu of his life. He chose a Fulu called the Soul-Fixing Talisman. The main function of this Fulu was to calm one's mind and concentrate one's mind. It had a miraculous effect on those who were frightened. According to the book, there were 3 main points of talismans. First, in order to draw a talisman, one must first clear one's mind. Only when one cleared all distracting thoughts and focused one's mind can one successfully enter the talisman drawing state. Second, the Fulu must be drawn in one go. In the complex talisman, there were many places that required one stroke to be drawn. Any pause or interruption could cause the Fulu to be ineffective. Third, the talisman must be filled with mana. If one's mana was too much or too little, the talisman drawing would fail. This was Li Mu's first time drawing a talisman. Li Qing was not here, so he had no one to ask for advice. He could only slowly explore by himself. The first thing he had to do was to familiarize himself with the runes of the soul-fixing talisman. This rune was composed of irregular dots and lines. To write it in one go was not an easy task. It required a lot of practice. Li Mu first used ordinary white paper and ink to practice writing the runes. This Fulu's grade was not high, but the runes were very complicated. It was dazzling to look at. He spent more than an hour before he was barely able to draw the runes in one go. What he had to do after that was to fill the tip of the brush with mana while drawing the runes. During this period, the strength of the mana and whether or not there was a pause or interruption when drawing the brush were all crucial to the success of the talisman drawing. This matter was difficult to think about, but it was even more difficult to actually do it. His mind remembered it, his eyes understood it, but his hands did not listen to him. Last time when he saw Li Qing draw a talisman, it was easy. Hanja also succeeded in one go. When it was his turn to do it himself, the situation was completely different. In a short while, he had already drawn 10 pieces in a row. The method to determine whether a Fulu was successful or not was very simple. After drawing, a Fulu that retained mana was a successful Fulu. A Fulu with mana dissipated was no different from a piece of waste paper. Li Mu summed up the reasons for failure. The conclusion he came to was that when he was drawing the talisman, his mind was not completely focused and could not completely enter the state of drawing the talisman. If his mind was not focused, the movements of the talisman drawing would be difficult to be coherent. The mana would also fluctuate, causing the talisman to fail. It was not that Li Mu did not want to focus. It was just that, when he was drawing the talisman, he had to recall the runes and maintain his mana. Both of them required distraction, so how could he be focused? The more he wanted to succeed in drawing the talisman, the more restless his heart was. The more restless his heart was, the easier it was for the talisman to fail. He seemed to have entered a contradictory cycle. Those who were proficient in talismans were probably familiar with the runes to the point of muscle memory. The current Li Mu was still far from being able to do this. Li Mu looked at the pile of waste paper on the floor and suddenly thought of an idea. He formed a one-handed sign and chanted in his heart. Heart as clear as ice, unperturbed even if the sky collapses. After chanting the clear heart mantra, Li Mu's face was calm and his heart was unperturbed. He had already entered the sage mode. He dipped the brush in ink and the tip of the brush moved quickly on the paper. In a moment, another fulu was formed in his hand. This talisman looked ordinary and was no different from the waste talismans on the floor. But when he held it in his hand, he could feel the flow of mana in the runes. He had clearly succeeded in drawing the talisman. Crafting a talisman was a laborious and exhausting matter to begin with. After failing for more than 10 times in a row, Li Mu's already little magic power was almost completely exhausted. His head also felt dizzy, and he powerlessly collapsed on the bed. Wanwan wanted to eat dumplings today. I made some. Do you want to eat some? Lu Hanyan walked in from outside. Looking at the waste paper on the floor and Li Mu who was lying weakly on the bed, she said in shock, "What were you doing just now?" In the next moment, she reacted. Her face first turned red and then became ashamed and angry. Li Mujing was at the age where he was full of energy. She could understand that he was doing things that he should do at his age. However, he had just offended her in the afternoon, and in the afternoon, this made Lu Hanyan wonder who he was fantasizing about. Seeing Lu Hanyan's face turn from red to white and from white to green, Li Mu knew that she must have misunderstood something. He hurriedly climbed up from the bed and said, "Don't misunderstand. I was drawing the talisman just now." Lu Hanyan asked suspiciously, "Drawing the talisman?" Li Mu hurriedly explained, "Isn't Wanwan's mind frightened? Ordinary prescriptions are useless for her, so I drew a soul-locking talisman. After turning it into talisman water and drinking it, it will immediately take effect." Lu Hanyan forgot for a moment whether or not Li Mu was committing blasphemy just now. She asked in surprise, "You know how to draw talismans?" Li Mu shrugged and said, "You also know my illness. In order to live, I have to try any method." He handed the soul-locking talisman that he had painstakingly drawn to Lu Hanyan and said, "Take this talisman back. After turning it into talisman water, let Wanwan drink it. Her illness will be cured very quickly." In order to maintain her figure, Lu Hanyan had tried many methods. She had gone to Taoist temples and temples. She had also drunk the so-called talisman water several times, but none of them were effective. Because of her own experience, she had always scoffed at Fulu and other things. Because of Li Mu's face, she still accepted the talisman, but she didn't want to try it on Wanwan. However, early the next morning, Wanwan's high fever still hadn't subsided. Lu Hanyan originally planned to go out and call a doctor, but when she had already walked to the door of the courtyard, she unexpectedly took out the Fulu. Although she didn't believe in Fulu, she trusted Li Mu. She thought about it and still turned the Fulu into talisman water. She brought it to Wanwan's bed and said, "Wanwan, drink this." The girl lying on the bed weakly said, "Miss, what is this?" "Medicine." Lu Hanyan helped her up and said, "Drink it quickly. Drink it and your illness will be cured." The girl opened her mouth and reluctantly drank the bowl of black medicine. Then Lu Hanyan saw an incomparably shocking scene. Wanwan, who was previously so weak that she couldn't even get up, immediately became lively after drinking the bowl of talisman water. She drank 3 bowls of porridge and ate 5 steamed buns in one breath. Lu Hanyan reached out to touch her forehead and found that her forehead was no longer hot. In the morning, Li Mu woke up early. After washing up, he was about to go to the yamen when there was a knock on the door. He opened the courtyard door and saw Lu Hanyan standing outside. She handed a box of food to Li Mu and said with a smile, "You haven't eaten breakfast yet, right? I bought some for you. You can go to the yamen after you finish eating." Li Mu looked at Lu Hanyan in confusion. Although she had taken care of him these days, things like delivering food were usually done by Wan. Today she actually came in person, which made Li Mu suspect that she had other intentions. However, he had received so many favors from others. Even if she really had other intentions, Li Mu wouldn't refuse. Li Mu looked directly into her eyes and said, "Lady Lu, if you have something to say, just say it. As long as I can do it, I will not refuse." Lu Hanyan didn't beat around the bush with Li Mu and asked directly, "Are there many kinds of talismans?" Li Mu nodded. There were many kinds of talismans in Taoism, and they had a wide range of uses. The talismans that could cure diseases, dispel ghosts, and kill demons only accounted for less than 1/10 of them. Lu Hanyan asked expectantly, "Is there a kind of fulu that can keep you fat no matter how much you eat?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I'm not sure about that, but there is a kind of talisman called youthful talisman. It can keep a person's face young and youthful. It should also have the effect of maintaining a good figure." He didn't know much about fulu. It was limited to the book Li Qing gave him. Many high-level fulu talismans could only be learned by the disciples of the fulu school. Cultivators had the ability to retain their youthful looks, so they didn't value this kind of fulu. Youthful looks and youthful looks. Lu Hanyan's beautiful eyes shone. She suddenly grabbed Li Mu's hand and said excitedly, "I want." Chapter 33. The fact that one's face would never age and that one's youth would last forever was a mysterious temptation to women. In her excitement, Lu Hanyan grabbed Li Mu's wrist so hard that it was bruised. Li Mu seriously suspected that she was taking the opportunity to take revenge. There was indeed a youth-retaining talisman. In addition, there was also the youth-retaining technique. Some female cultivators who cared more about their appearance would mostly cultivate this technique. Therefore, in the cultivation world, it was difficult to judge whether a woman was 18 or 80 years old by her appearance. Li Mu probably knew why Lu Hanyan was so excited. She was different from Wan. Judging from her daily habits, she seemed to be the kind of person who would gain weight easily just by drinking water. Therefore, she had been dieting for a long time to maintain her figure. Li Mu didn't agree with this kind of behavior that was close to self-abuse. Life was short. Clothing, food, shelter, and transportation were necessities of life. If you couldn't even eat casually, then what was the meaning of life? "I want that kind of fulu." Lu Hanyan grabbed Li Mu's hand and said eagerly, "Name a price, no matter how much it is." Li Mu didn't forget that he still owed Lu Hanyan 10 taels of silver. The favor he owed her couldn't be measured by money. He broke free of her hand and said, "There's no need to talk about money. When I'm free tonight, I'll try to draw a picture for you." After comforting Lu Hanyan, Li Mu closed the courtyard door and walked to the county yamen. "Li Mu, well done. Lord Zhang personally praised the three of you yesterday. It's a pity that you weren't here. You even dared to touch the Zhao family. You have guts. I admire you." The Zhao Yong case was the highlight of Li Mu, Zhang Shan, and Li Si. When Li Mu walked into the yamen, many bailiffs took the initiative to greet him. After staying outside for a while and chatting with everyone, Li Mu walked into his room. Today's room was unusually quiet. Old Wang wasn't there, Zhang Shan wasn't playing dice, and he sat in his seat obediently. Li Si wasn't lying on the table to catch up on sleep, which was a rare occurrence. While Li Mu was puzzled, a faint fragrance suddenly came from behind him. Smelling the familiar fragrance, Li Mu turned around and asked in surprise, "Boss, when did you come back?" Every time he saw Li Qing, he felt inexplicably at ease. It seemed that as long as she was there was no problem that couldn't be solved. This was indeed the case. Whether it was the soul-condensing technique, curing illnesses, expelling evil spirits, or searching memories, as long as Li Mu encountered something, she would always be able to provide a solution. I just came back. Li Qing looked at him, and a strange expression suddenly flashed across her face. She said, "Come with me." Zhang Shan watched in confusion as Li Mu followed Li Qing out. He murmured, "What does boss want to say to Li Mu? Why did she avoid us?" He thought about it and immediately guessed the reason. Li Mu was seriously ill. Coincidentally, the boss had returned to the sect. She must have found a way to save him. Of the cultivators in the county yamen, only she would care so much about her subordinates. Thinking of Li Mu's illness, he sighed and said, "I hope boss has a way." Li Qing walked out of the room and said to Li Mu, "Give me your hand." Li Mu extended his hand without thinking. Li Qing placed 2 fingers on his wrist and guided her mana to circulate through his body. Only then did she let go. She said in surprise, "It's only been a few days, but your mana has improved so much. Have you already formed the first soul?" Li Mu smiled and said, "It's all thanks to Miss Lin Wan. Otherwise, the first soul would not have formed so quickly." Li Qing looked at him, praise in her eyes. She said, "I've heard of that case. You did well." Li Mu said embarrassedly, "We should. It is our duty to protect justice and redress the grievances of the people." Saying this, he handed the Qinghong sword in his hand to Li Qing and said, "Take this sword back. I already have a certain amount of power to protect myself. Your daily tasks are more dangerous. You need it more than me." Li Mu had many trump cards and did not need this magical artifact to protect himself. On the other hand, Li Qing usually had to deal with cases that were more dangerous than Li Mu and the others. Without the Qinghong sword, her strength would be greatly reduced. Li Qing took the Qinghong sword and said, "Wait a moment." She walked into the room and quickly came out. She gave another sword that was similar to the Qinghong sword to Li Mu and said, "This sword is for you. This is the sword I used in the soul refining realm. It suits you right now. With it, if you encounter an ordinary wraith, you can kill it with 1 strike. There's also a sword manual. I left it on the table in the room. Remember to practice it." "Thank you, boss." Li Mu was not pretentious. Although he did not want to owe others anything, he would not refuse their kind intentions. Rather than pretentiously refuse, it was better to accept it calmly and then remember this friendship in his heart. He would slowly find an opportunity to repay it in the future. He treated Lu Hanyan like this, and he treated Li Qing like this as well. However, in terms of status, Li Qing was higher than him. In terms of strength, even 10 Li Mu would not be her match. In a short period of time, Li Mu could not think of an opportunity to repay her. "Go patrol." Li Qing did not say much, but when she left, she turned back and added a sentence. "The sword's name is Bai." Although Li Qing only gave him his old item, Li Mu was still very happy. The Bai sword was not as good as the Qinghong sword. It was more suitable for the current Li Mu. Compared to Li Qing, his mana was weak and could not unleash the true power of the Qinghong sword. Moreover, magic items needed to be nurtured. What determined the strength of a magic item was often not the magic item itself, but the owner of the magic item. As long as Li Mu often used his mana to control it, it would become like the Qinghong sword sooner or later. The first soul had been condensed. Li Mu did not need to feel happy anymore. When he patrolled the streets, his mood was much more relaxed. His eyes did not wander around the old women. After patrolling 1 round, he did not find anything unusual. Li Mu went home and changed into casual clothes. Then he walked out of the house again. After he submitted the manuscript of Strange Stories from a Strange Story, he was affected by Lin Wan's case. He did not go to the bookstore to ask about it until today. The reason why he changed into regular clothes was because his identity as a bailiff was not in line with the image of a scholar. Those who wrote books for a living were all downtrodden scholars. Dressing shabbily was more in line with the image of a downtrodden scholar. Of course, there was also the most important point. The officials of the Great Zhou were not allowed to do business. Although writing books was not considered business, it was still somewhat close. It was better to keep a low profile. Li Mu first went to the first bookstore. He walked to the counter and said, "Help me check if the manuscript I submitted last time was chosen." The shopkeeper glanced at him and asked, "Name?" Li Mu said, "Pu Songling." The shopkeeper flipped through a thick book for a long time. Finally, he found a line. He shook his head and said, "Your novel does not meet our requirements. You should go to another bookstore." Being rejected by the first bookstore was not out of Li Mu's expectations. After all, the supernatural novels in this world were as vast as the sea. A novel that was popular in the other world may not be able to replicate its glory here. Moreover, the taste of the reviewer would affect the final result. Therefore, he did not put all his eggs in the same basket. Instead, he submitted to several bookstores at the same time. After walking out of the first bookstore, Li Mu went to the second, third, fourth, and fifth bookstores. Every chapter is so short. Only a few hundred words. Are you writing a novel? Is there a novel as short as yours? I just started reading and it's already over. What about the main plot? What about your main plot? You don't even have a main plot. What do you want the readers to read? The title of your novel is not good. The content is also a mess. You should go to another bookstore. I'm sorry, but your manuscript hasn't reached our hiring standards yet. Our suggestion is to cut it. Writing this kind of thing is a pure waste of time. After being rejected countless times, Li Mu walked out of the last bookstore. He looked at the scorching sun above his head and sighed. Writing a novel was indeed a dead end. The story format of a Chinese strange stories did not seem to be recognized by these bookstores. It seemed that he had to think of other ways to make money. Li Mu was about to go back when the shopkeeper of the last bookstore suddenly rushed out. Seeing that he had not left, he let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Young master, please wait." Chapter 34. Yunyan Pavilion. Li Mu sat in the guest seat in a private room. The shopkeeper served him tea with a flattering expression and said politely, "Young master, please have some tea." Li Mu took a sip of the tea. The aroma of the tea was clear and refreshing, and his mouth was full of sweetness. It was obviously a high-quality tea. Compared to the tea here, the tea that old Wang treated him to at the yamen was no different from boiled grass. The middle-aged shopkeeper stood up and bowed to him. "I was blind just now and almost caused a pearl to be covered in dust. I hope young master will not blame me." Yunyan Pavilion was the last bookstore that Li Mu visited. Originally, he had been rejected, but for some reason, just as Li Mu was about to leave, the shopkeeper chased after him. His attitude was completely different from before. Could it be that he had finally discovered the value of strange stories from a Chinese studio and was ready to discuss a collaboration with him? The shopkeeper's face was full of smiles as he explained, "I have just read your book. Every word is like a gem, touching and thought-provoking. I wonder if you are interested in working with the House of Yunyan?" Other than this bookstore, the other bookstores either guided Li Mu on how to write a book or suggested that he directly cut it off. Li Mu had no other choice. He directly asked the question that concerned him the most. "How is the remuneration calculated?" The shopkeeper explained, "A volume of 10,000 words costs 2 to 1 tael of silver per volume. After printing, after deducting the printing and labor costs, the profits will be split 40 to 60. Young master will take 40%. In addition, young master can choose to sell it to us directly. The price is 10 taels of silver per volume. The risk of printing will be borne by the bookstore, but the profits will go to the bookstore. Of course, young master can also sell one volume first and make a decision later. We will provide you with many choices." Before submitting the book, Li Mu had studied the market in detail. The price that the shopkeeper of Yunyan Pavilion gave him was not low. 10 taels of silver per volume could only be obtained by famous authors who had previously written best-selling works. For a newbie like him who had just entered the industry and had no representative works, even if he painstakingly wrote 10,000 words, he would only earn a few taels of silver. Could it be that this shopkeeper really had a pair of discerning eyes and could tell that strange stories from a Chinese studio would definitely sell well? Li Mu thought about it and decided to sell a scroll to test the waters. There was a risk in splitting the profits directly. If the sales were not good after one volume was printed, the bookstore might directly cut the profits. At that time, he would only get 2 to 1 tael of silver, which was not even enough to buy the materials for the talisman. However, if he were to sell them all at the price of 10 silver taels per scroll, he would lose a lot of money if the book became popular. The best way was to sell one volume first, observe the market, and make a follow-up decision after the market test. After thinking it through, Li Mu looked at the shopkeeper and said, "Then let's sell one scroll first." The shopkeeper nodded and said, "I will go draw up the contract." Selling the first volume of strange stories from a Chinese studio for 10 silver taels had already greatly exceeded Li Mu's expectations. The shopkeeper was a person who knew the value of the book. The other bookstores either asked him for the outline of the main plot or directly asked him to cut it. Li Mu planned to return the 10 silver taels to Lu Hanyan first. Even blood brothers settled accounts clearly. The favor could be slowly repaid in the future. It was better to return the money as soon as possible. After signing the contract, Li Mu took the 10 silver taels and planned to go back to cook. Lu Hanyan had entrusted Wan to him. Since he had promised her, he had to keep his word. After Li Mu left the Union Pavilion, the shopkeeper slowly walked upstairs and knocked on the door. He said, "Miss, everything has been arranged. We gave him the highest price." Through the window, a graceful figure could be seen in the room. The woman stood in front of the window and looked down at the figure on the street below. She said, "In the future, if he has any requests, try to satisfy them. As for the manuscript, he can hand it in whenever he wants. Don't rush him." "I know." The shopkeeper sighed and couldn't help but say, "But this way, we will lose a lot of money." The woman said without hesitation, "Just do as I say." The middle-aged shopkeeper could only agree helplessly. After all, he was just a worker, and the entire bookstore belonged to her. Not to mention giving the poor scholar preferential treatment. As long as she was willing, she could even give the store to him. However, what he couldn't understand was that if the young lady had read the scholar's essay, it would have been fine. However, she didn't even read it before asking him to chase him back and give him the best treatment. Could it be that the young lady had taken a liking to that scholar's man? Thinking about it carefully, it wasn't impossible. After all, although the scholar's essay was ordinary, he was indeed handsome. If the woman liked him, the shopkeeper secretly told himself that he must be more polite to that person in the future. Otherwise, in the future, if he whispered pillow talk beside the woman, he was afraid that he would have to pack up and go home. Li Mu's luck was good today. Just the first volume of Strange Stories sold for 10 taels of silver. Even if the market's response wasn't good, he could still copy something else. He first went home, and then went out with Wan to buy some vegetables, a fish, and a chicken before returning home. Lu Hanyan was busy with the store during the day and would only come back in the afternoon. Li Mu made a small fortune and planned to cook a good meal in the evening to thank her for taking care of him these days. At noon, Li Mu and Wan cooked some simple noodles. Li Mu ate a bowl and Wan ate 3 bowls. The little maid's appetite was big, but she couldn't be considered slim. Her oval-shaped face was round, and she was just right for being fat. Even so, it was enough to make Lu Hanyan envious. She had been dieting for a long time to achieve her current figure. Once she ate freely, it would be difficult to maintain her figure. This was also the reason why she was so obsessed with the youthful talisman. When he wrote the talisman for Wan yesterday, there were still a lot of materials left. Li Mu returned to his room and flipped open the book with Zhu Sha and Cheng Mo. He found the page of the youthful talisman and silently recited the clear heart chant. Yesterday, when he was writing the talisman, Li Mu found another use of the clear heart chant. Other than helping him to clear his mind and resist the temptation of illusions, when he recited the clear heart chant, he would be in absolute sage mode. His mind would be incomparably focused, and it would be difficult for him to be distracted by external things. In this state of extreme concentration, when he memorized words and talismans, he would almost have an eidetic memory. Li Mu looked at the youthful talisman and recorded it stroke by stroke in his mind. After closing his eyes for a long time, he opened them again and quickly wrote on the paper. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there was a piece of fulu in his hand that contained mana. Yesterday, he used a whole hour to write the soul-locking talisman and failed countless times. Today, when he was writing the youthful talisman, he only failed 3 times. He mainly saved time on learning and familiarizing himself with the talismans. In his mind, there were various Taoist mantras and incantations that had endless uses. He still had to slowly explore them in the future. After dinner, Wan took the initiative to clean up the dishes. Li Mu went straight back to the yamen. In the afternoon, the weather was hot and stuffy, so they usually stayed in the guardroom. Li Mu continued to read the introductory cultivation book. Li Qing had a mission and was not in the yamen. Zhang Shan went to Old Wang's guardroom to wash away the humiliation. Li Si, whose day and night were reversed, was lying on the table and dozing off as usual. What was recorded in this book was only some shallow basics of cultivation. The more profound spells and supernatural powers were regarded as secret scriptures by the major sections. It was not easy to come into contact with them. However, with his current insignificant cultivation, he could only use some shallow spells. The most important thing right now was to condense his soul and save his life. After leaving the yamen, Li Mu originally wanted to invite Zhang Shan and Li Si to go home for dinner. Li Si refused, saying that he had something to do. Zhang Shan wanted to go home to accompany his wife. Li Mu went home alone. As he walked, he considered the matter of cultivation. Now that the first soul had been condensed, he should be able to prepare for the second soul. As for which soul to condense, Li Mu had already decided in his heart. He did not mean it, but Li Mu listened attentively. He did not want to hear the words "calm in the bosom" from anyone in the future. For a man, being described in such a way was the greatest humiliation. However, the sparrowshade was born from sorrow. It was easy for others to be grateful to him, but how could he make others feel sorrow, grief, mourning, and pity for him? He could not always pretend to be pitiful in front of Lu Hanyan. In the past, when they were not close, Li Mu could still suck her. Now that they were so close, Li Mu could not do it. When he was about to reach the door, Li Mu raised his head and saw a familiar figure standing at the door. She looked in the direction of the yamen and raised her head in anticipation. Seeing Lu Hanyan wave at him from afar, Li Mu's heart actually moved. If he could have a woman like this waiting for him to come home every day when he went to the yamen, then the hardships and tiredness outside would not be a big deal. It was a pity that a woman like her, who was worth dozens of taels of silver every minute, was not destined to play the role of a wife. Li Mu walked to the door. Lu Hanyan saw him coming and smiled. "The food is ready. Come in and eat." Chapter 35. Walking back home, Li Mu looked at the table full of dishes, then looked at Lu Hanyan and said in disbelief, "Did you make all these?" Wan swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said, "Of course. My miss is good in the hall and the kitchen. She can sing and dance and is proficient in 18 kinds of musical instruments. These dishes were all made by my miss just now. They are delicious." One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Lu Hanyan was neither evil nor evil, so she naturally had something to ask. After a brief moment of astonishment, Li Mu understood why she was so solicitous. He took out the folded youth-retaining talisman from his sleeve and handed it to Lu Hanyan. After Lu Hanyan received it, a trace of joy appeared on her face and she immediately ran to the kitchen. Li Mu was about to change out of his official uniform when he realized something. He ran to the kitchen door and saw Lu Hanyan drinking a bowl of water. Li Mu opened his mouth and said, "Youth-retaining talisman is not used like that." Lu Hanyan had already put down the bowl and said in surprise, "Then how do I use it?" "Fold the fulu and carry it close to your body." "Ew." The principle of the youth-retaining talisman was different from that of the soul-fixing talisman. One was from the outside to the inside, while the other was from the inside to the outside. The principle was different, so the way to use the fulu was also different. The soul-fixing talisman was from the inside to the outside and needed to be turned into talisman water to be swallowed. The youth-retaining talisman was from the outside to the inside. As long as it was carried close to the body, it would gather spiritual qi and nourish the body. After Lu Hanyan vomited, she looked at Li Mu with a pale face and asked in a low voice, "Do you have more?" Li Mu took out a pen and paper and drew another youth-retaining talisman. He folded it and handed it to her, saying, "This talisman will last for 3 days. After 3 days I will draw a new one for you." Lu Hanyan carefully placed the fulu close to her body and said with a smile, "Let's eat first. The food is getting cold. We don't have any kitchenware at home, so we borrowed your kitchen." Li Mu picked up his chopsticks and put the first bite into his mouth. He knew that Wan Wan's evaluation of Lu Hanyan was not exaggerated. Li Mu himself could only bring out a few kinds of barbecue sauces and a bowl of yangchun noodles. At this moment, there were several dishes on the table, both meat and vegetables. Each dish had its own unique flavor. Lu Hanyan looked up at him and asked, "I haven't cooked for a long time, so it's inevitable that my skills are rusty. Are these dishes to your liking?" Li Mu said from the bottom of his heart. Lady Lu's cooking skills. Li Mu is ashamed of his inferiority. Generally speaking, a woman who was good at singing and dancing generally had a good family background. At the same time, it was very rare to have such cooking skills. Lu Hanyan smiled and said, "Wan Wan is full of praise for your cooking skills. I can only cook a few bowls of noodles." Li Mu said modestly. He took out the 10 taels of silver he earned today and put it on the table in front of him, saying, "This is the money for the medicine that day. Lady Lu, please accept it." Lu Hanyan did not refuse. After accepting the silver, she said, "I will ask Wan Wan to send the IOU over in a while. Without debt, one would be light." Although his first bucket of gold was all used to pay off his debts, if strange stories from a strange story could be recognized, even if he could not become rich with one book, his future life would be much better. After dinner, Lu Hanyan went back first, while Wan Wan stayed to help Li Mu clean up the dishes. Li Mu was quite curious about Lu Hanyan. She had both the elegance and coldness of a lady from a noble family and the approachability of a girl next door. She sang a good song and cooked well. A weak woman dared to wander in a strange place with only a little maid. Many men did not have this courage and boldness, and it was even rarer in a woman. When they were washing the dishes together, Li Mu asked Wan Wan, "Wan Wan, where did you and your miss live before? Why did you come to Beijun?" "We used to live in Zhongjuan." Wan Wan put the washed dishes aside and said, "Miss said that it was too tiring to live in Zhongjuan. Food was expensive, houses were expensive, rouge was expensive, and everything was expensive, so we moved to Beijun." Li Mu asked again, "Doesn't your miss have a family?" Wan Wan said, "Miss's family is me." Li Mu said, "I mean her parents, brothers, and sisters." "No." Wan Wan shook her head and said, "When I was picked up by Miss, she was alone. Later, I heard from the owner that Miss was sold to the music house. Her family should have been long gone." Li Mu thought that Lu Hanyan should be from a noble family. He did not expect her to have such an experience. No wonder she sang so well and was proficient in all kinds of musical instruments. Then he thought of something and looked at Wan Wan in surprise. "You were picked up by her?" Wan Wan stuck out her tongue in embarrassment and said, "When we were running away, my parents thought I ate too much, so they left me on the road. It was Miss who picked me up. If it were not for Miss, I would have starved to death when I was 5 years old." "And then?" "Later, Miss sang and played for people on the stage. I washed clothes for the sisters in the music house and slowly saved money. When I saved enough money to redeem Mrs. Freedom and open a shop, I came here. Originally, many young masters wanted to help Miss redeem her freedom, but Miss said that it was better to rely on oneself than on others. Even her parents and relatives were not reliable, let alone those who liked her beauty. When she was old and ugly, she would be kicked away. After listening to Wanwan's words, Li Mu could not help but admire Lu Hanyan. Not all women were so independent. Even in his era, a woman like Lu Hanyan was the benchmark of independent women in the new era. As Wanwan spoke, her tone suddenly changed as she asked, "If Miss has that talisman, will she never grow old?" After all, the youth-retaining talisman was not a youth-retaining technique. There was a limit to its effectiveness. Li Mu said, "It's not that she will never grow old, but at least 10 or 20 years later, she will still look the same." Wanwan lowered her head and rubbed the corner of her clothes. She whispered, "That talisman, can you give me one too? I also want to be like Mississippi. I can give you all my private money." "How much private money could this little girl have?" Li Mu smiled and said, "I will draw one for you in a while. You should keep your private money to buy candied haws." The girl's eyes curved and said, 100 taels can buy a lot of candied haws." Li Mu was stunned for a moment. "How much?" The girl said, 100 taels. I saved it for a long, long time." Fortunately, the youth-retaining talisman was not a high-level talisman, so it did not consume much magic power. After Li Mu finished drawing it, he gave it to Wanwan. Seeing her jump and jump as she left, he secretly sighed. As a bailiff who only received 500 copper coins a month, he could never imagine how rich a rich person could be. He only thought that Lu Hanyan was a rich woman, but he did not expect that even the maid of a rich woman was also a rich woman. If he had 100 taels, he would not be able to write a novel. It was fine if he was told that there was no main plot, but he was also always scolded for being too short. If he was not forced by life, who would be willing to suffer such grievances? Tomorrow was a day of rest. There was no need to go to the yamen or patrol. Li Mu woke up early in the morning and practiced his sword for an hour. After eating breakfast with Wanwan, he left the house and walked straight out of the county. That day, He had said that after Zhao Yong was executed, he should go to the Bay of Clear Water. She had something to give him. Although Li Mu did not know what it was, it would be a waste if he did not accept a gift from someone else. His intuition told him that whatever he gave him must be something good. Although he had already set foot in the cultivation world, compared to those disciples of famous sects, he was still too far away. Other people had masters to teach them and could obtain any resources they wanted from their sections. He had to rely on freeloading cultivation methods and equipment, so he could not let go of any free opportunity. He walked all the way out of the county and along the official road. He arrived at the Bay of Clearwater in less than an hour. Li Mu walked alone on the road. When he was not far from the Bay of Clearwater, he suddenly stopped and turned around to look at a giant tree behind him. In a deep voice he said, "Who's there?" Ever since the formation of the first soul, Li Mu's vigilance had greatly increased. Just a moment ago, he felt a hair-raising aura from the direction of the giant tree. He could already be considered a cultivator, so he would not have this kind of feeling for no reason. The giant tree stood in the same place without any movement. Li Mu's gaze was fixed on the giant tree. Not long after, a tall and thin figure peeled off from the trunk and looked at Li Mu with a surprised expression. The figure was tall, but extremely thin. When it was attached to the trunk, its skin and clothes were the same color as the trunk. Now that it had peeled off from the trunk, the clothes on its body had become ordinary green clothes. Its skin had also returned from its original grayish-brown color to its normal appearance. Chapter 36. To think that you are also a cultivator. The tall and thin man glanced at Li Mu and said calmly, "Looks like that useless junior brother of mine died in your hands?" The only one who died in Li Mu's hands was the dwarf invited by the Zhao family. He did not expect that the other party would have a senior brother. Li Mu's gaze swept across the tall and thin man. When his gaze swept past his eyes, his heart suddenly tightened. This person's eyes were not like that of a normal person. Within his eyeballs was a pair of vertical pupils. A normal person could not possibly have such pupils. Almost instantly, Li Mu guessed the reason and blurted out, A shape-shifting demon. There were 9 realms of demon cultivation. The first realm was called Awakening. Demons in this realm could only develop basic spiritual intelligence. Their intelligence was like that of a 3-year-old child. When demons cultivated to the second realm, embryonic molding, their spiritual intelligence was no different from that of a normal person. They could understand humans, speak human language, and move quickly. Although they still had the body of a beast, their body had already undergone a metamorphosis. Most of the beasts in the forest were no match for shape-shifting demons. The white fox that Li Mu saved was in this realm. However, she might have just undergone embryonic molding. Otherwise, she would not have been caught by the hunter's trap. The third realm, shape-shifting, was a stage where a demon cultivator's strength would increase explosively. Human cultivators, whether they were Taoists or Buddhists, their first metamorphosis was when they entered the middle 3 realms from the lower 3 realms. However, demon cultivators were different. Their cultivation was much more difficult than humans. However, after shape-shifting, they could truly be reborn. Their bodies were incomparably tough. Coupled with their race's abilities, they were much more difficult to deal with than ghosts. Even a cultivator at the third realm, spirit condensation, would have a headache when faced with shape-shifting demons. Li Mu, who had only condensed 1 soul. If not for the 9 syllables mantra that was comparable to Taoist techniques, he would not be much different from a normal person. It would already be difficult for him to deal with a shape-shifting demon, let alone shape-shifting. The tall and thin man sized up Li Mu. A trace of doubt appeared on his face as he questioned. Although my junior brother was useless, he still had the cultivation of spirit condensation. The mana fluctuations on your body are so weak. At most, you have only refined 1 soul. How did you kill him? Li Mu did not answer. You don't want to talk? The expert looked at Li Mu, grinned, and said, If you don't say it now, I'll peel your skin, pull out your tendons, and search your soul. Then I'll know everything. At this moment, Li Mu's lips moved slightly as he softly uttered a syllable. Boom! A bolt of lightning suddenly descended and struck the tall and thin man's head. Li Mu heaved a sigh of relief. After realizing that the other party was a shape-shifting demon cultivator, he raised his guard in his heart. In the 9 words mantra, the first word, Thunder Method, was his biggest and only killing move. When facing an opponent who was much stronger than him, he had to concentrate all his attention and spirit to ensure that he could kill him in 1 blow. Otherwise, he would be the one to die. Li Mu looked in the direction of the man, his pupils constricting. When the lightning struck, the tall and skinny man didn't turn into charcoal like the dwarf. His figure disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only a yellow talisman. Puff! After the talisman fell to the ground, it burned on its own and turned into ashes. The tall and skinny man's figure appeared in another direction. At this moment, he was no longer as calm as before. His face was pale and filled with fear as he said in shock, Thunder Method! Thunder Method was a remarkable ability that only cultivators of the Middle Realm could use. If the young man opposite him was a Middle Realm expert, he would definitely die today. In fact, if not for the substitute talisman that he bought at a high price 2 years ago that blocked the lightning for him, he would already be dead. The tall and skinny man's body trembled as he said in panic, Thunder Method. You haven't even refined the 7 spirits. How can you know Thunder Method? No, this isn't Thunder Method. Thunder Method can't be used so quickly. This is a Tao technique, a Tao technique. Even cultivators of the assembled spirit realm couldn't master Thunder Method, let alone refined spirit realm. Only the legendary Tao technique could mobilize the power of heaven and earth in such a short time with insignificant dermic power. Boom! Another bolt of lightning struck, but the tall and skinny man was prepared and dodged nimbly. Boom! Boom boom! Boom boom boom! Bolts of lightning struck down, leaving charred pits in the ground nearby. However, not a single bolt of lightning struck the tall and skinny man. The tall and skinny man's initial panic gradually turned to surprise and calmness. In the end, he looked at Li Mu with a mocking gaze and said, Strike, strike again. So what if you know Tao techniques? Once I search your soul, This thunder method Dao technique will be mine. In contrast to the tall and skinny man, Li Mu's expression grew more and more solemn. It was only now that he realized that after using thunder method to scare away the evil ghost and kill the dwarf, he had a wrong understanding of his own strength. In terms of cultivation, he was like a baby. Even if he had a sharp weapon in his hand, he was still no match for an unarmed adult. As his dermic power gradually dried up, his face slowly turned pale. In the end, he could no longer release lightning. The tall and skinny man still maintained a distance from Li Mu. At a certain moment, he suddenly opened his mouth and a jade-green tongue shot out from his mouth. Like a vine, it wrapped around Li Mu's neck. Just as the tongue was about to wrap around Li Mu suddenly flipped his palm. A yellow talisman appeared in his palm, and he stuck it on the tall and skinny man's tongue. This was the fulu that the dwarf used to freeze Zhongshan. The tall and skinny man's tongue froze in the air. His body also froze for a moment. However, in the next moment, his tongue began to wriggle again. Clearly, that fulu couldn't completely freeze it. However, for Li Mu, a moment was enough. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck the tall and skinny man's head directly. His clothes turned into ashes and his body was also turned into charcoal in an instant. A faint shadow slowly floated out from his charcoal corpse. It was a huge lizard. It floated in the air and its fist-sized eyes stared fixedly at Li Mu. It roared with incomparable rage. "Lowly food, you dare to destroy my body. I will chew your soul bite by bite." With its body destroyed, it was extremely furious. Pounced towards Li Mu from the air. Li Mu put his palms together and his lips trembled. His body gradually emitted a golden light. The lizard's shadow was blocked outside the golden light. Every time it wanted to approach, it would be burnt and forced back. It floated in the air and stared coldly at Li Mu. It said sinisterly, "So what if you know Buddhist scriptures? I want to see how long your dermic power can last." Li Mu's body was shining with golden light. However, his heart had already sunk to the bottom. The countless bolts of lightning just now had already exhausted his dermic power. However, it still did not completely destroy this lizard spirit. At this moment, he was only relying on the dermic power in the string of Buddhist prayer beads. Li Mu could feel that the dermic power in the string of Buddhist prayer beads in his hand was almost exhausted. The Bay of Clearwater was not far ahead. Li Mu gritted his teeth and ran forward. The lizard spirit's soul followed behind him and said coldly, "I want to see where you can run to. Today, no one can save you." Bang! Li Mu ran for more than 10 steps. The dermic power in the string of Buddhist prayer beads in his hand was exhausted and shattered. At the same time, the dermic light on his body disappeared in an instant. Li Mu felt the world spinning. Then his vision turned black and he fainted on the ground, unconscious. The lizard's shadow had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Seeing this, it laughed maniacally. It opened its mouth and pounced towards the fallen Li Mu. However, as it pounced, it could only wave its 4 claws in the air. Its body did not move at all. The lizard spirit twisted its body and saw that not far behind it, a woman in white was floating in the air. One of her hands was grabbing onto its tail. That hand looked very slender, but it seemed to have a huge force that made it unable to break free. Feeling the aura of the woman in white, its eyes were filled with extreme fear. It said in a trembling voice, "Spare, spare." The woman in white's eyes were indifferent. She took a light breath and the lizard spirit's soul immediately collapsed. It turned into a cloud of mist and was sucked into her body. Suhi's face was filled with satisfaction. She flew down and picked up Li Mu by the waist. Then, they disappeared into the depths of the forest by the river. Chapter 37. When Li Mu woke up again, he found himself lying on a bed. This seemed to be a wooden house. The furnishings in the house were extremely simple. There was a bed, a table, a chair, a bookshelf, and a shelf for storing items. Although it was simple, it was extremely tidy. His last memory was of him fighting with that lizard spirit in the metamorphosis stage. He schemed to destroy the lizard spirit's physical body. However, even though the lizard spirit had lost its physical body, its spirit was still powerful. In the end, Li Mu exhausted his transcendence energy and fainted. He could vaguely see the lizard spirit's spirit pouncing towards him. Li Mu sat up from the bed and mumbled, "I'm dead." Suhi walked in from outside and said, "If I had come a moment later, you might have really died in the hands of that beast." Li Mu was stunned for a moment. Then, he exclaimed in surprise, "Miss Su, drink some water." Suhi handed a teacup to Li Mu and asked, "How did you provoke a metamorphosis demon?" Li Mu picked up the teacup and moistened his lips. Then, he said, "In order to hide Lin Wan's matter, the Zhao clan once hired a heretical cultivation. When my colleagues and I were investigating the case, we were discovered by him. He originally wanted to kill us to silence us, but I was lucky enough to kill him. That demon said that he was the senior brother of the heretical cultivation and was probably here to seek revenge." He looked at him with a different expression. She said, "You've just started cultivating, and you're already able to injure a metamorphosis demon to such an extent. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, it would really be hard to believe." Li Mu smiled bitterly. "I only used a little trick. A third realm demon is too powerful. I was no match for it at all. If not for you, I'm afraid there wouldn't even be anything left of me now." Thinking of that lizard spirit, Li Mu looked at Suhi and asked, "Right? Where's that demon spirit?" Suhi said casually, "It's already dead. I swallowed its spirit." Li Mu originally thought that Suhi was just a third-realm evil spirit. From the looks of it now, he had still underestimated her abilities. That lizard spirit was a third-realm demon. Even if his physical body had dissipated, his soul would not be weaker than a third-realm evil spirit. Even so, he still died in the hands of Suhi. Her cultivation must have already entered the middle realm. The lower three realms of ghost cultivators could only be called spirits. Nether spirits, resentful spirits, and evil spirits all belong to the spiritual bodies. Spiritual bodies belong to the Yin attribute and were restrained by Thunder Dharma and Light of Buddha. Even if the cultivators of Buddhism and Taoism were not as profound as them, they could still defeat the strong with the help of Orthodox Buddhism. The middle three realms of ghostly cultivators were also known as the soul realm. Ghosts in this realm had already shed their Yin spirit bodies and become soul bodies. They could condense a physical body at any time and no longer feared the light of Buddha or other means against ghosts. Cultivators would no longer have any advantage when fighting against them. As for the upper three realms, that was the true ghost realm. Their magic power was profound, and they could reverse Yin and Yang and mediate creation. Even in the ghost region of Yudu, they could control millions of ghosts and were existences that ruled the world. It was no wonder that when Li Mu mentioned the imperial court, she was not afraid at all. Resentful spirits and evil spirits could be killed by the imperial court. As for ghost cultivators in the middle three realms, if they could sit down and talk nicely, the higher-ups would definitely not use force. After Suhi finished speaking, she looked at Li Mu again and said, "I sense the aura of Thunder Dharma there. Furthermore, it was not guided by Fu Lu. It was a pure and direct Thunder Dharma. Thunder Dharma is a spell that only divine arts realm cultivators can cultivate. Your magic power is shallow, so it is impossible for you to execute Thunder Dharma divine arts. Could it be that you used Dao techniques?" With Li Mu's current cultivation, other than borrowing the power of heaven and earth, he did not have the ability to cross realms to kill enemies. He nodded at Suhi and did not deny it. Suhi looked at him with a weird gaze and said puzzledly, "Scriptures? Dao techniques? They are all secret techniques of Buddhism and Dao sect. They are only passed down to core disciples. You know scriptures and Dao techniques, but your magic power is so weak. You also don't know much about cultivation." Li Mu had an awkward expression. There was no way he could explain this to her. He couldn't possibly say that there was a year when a monk and a Taoist fainted in front of his house during winter. Suhi did not continue asking and only said, "Forget it, Everyone has their own opportunities. But you have to remember, before you have the ability to protect yourself, it is best not to let others know about it. Otherwise, it could bring you a fatal disaster. Li Mu nodded and said, I understand. He took out a book from the bookshelf in the corner and said, This is for you. It should be useful to you. Take it as a thank you for helping Lin Wan seek justice. Li Mu remembered that she said last time that if he could solve Lin Wan's problem, she would give him something. Could it be this? He took the book that did not have a cover and flipped it open. He saw that there were countless small words densely packed on the cover. The wind comes out of Zhenhorn, the earthly soldier platoon, the road in front of Sunfang, the ferocious wind calls, urgent as the law commands. The four seas origin, the 5 mountains drive forward. The stone cracks defy, dare to spread scales. Moving clouds arrange qi, gather substance and refine truth. 6 ding 6 jia. Urgent as the law commands. The eastern jia qian yuanheng righteous qi speed current. I receive long life, heaven and earth palm horizontal. Follow me incantation when used, thunder and rain soar. Rapidly descend, rapidly reveal true form. Urgent as the law commands. Li Mu was shocked. What was recorded in this book was actually all Taoist spells and abilities. Borrow the wind and move fog. Pray for clear skies and rain. Summon coming and going. Tread on water and sit on fire. Ride the wind and water. Chase souls and absorb souls. Hide and hide. In addition, there were several thunder spells, exorcism incantation. He flipped through a few pages and found that this book only had half of it. It recorded dozens of Taoist spells and abilities from the tempering soul to the transcendent realm. The power of Taoist spells was incomparably strong. Even those with weak dermic powers could borrow the power of heaven and earth through Taoist spells and use powerful spells. In order to prevent them from falling into the hands of people with evil intentions and harming the world, Taoist spells had always been a secret. Although these spells and abilities were not as secretive as Taoist spells, they were still not easily obtained through conventional means. If the book that Li Qing gave him was just a basic introduction, then this book was an advanced tutorial. It could allow Li Mu to cultivate to the 4th realm without any hindrance. He said, more than 10 years ago, there was a Taoist priest who was fighting with a demon above the Bay of Clearwater. His cultivation was not as good as the demon, so his body and soul were devoured. This half of the Taoist book fell from his body. I was originally a Yin spirit in this pool, but after obtaining this book, I learned some Taoist techniques. In the past 10 years, I have cultivated intermittently, and only then did I reach my current cultivation. Li Mu did not decline and kept the book. He smiled and said, Looks like you really did cultivate by yourself. Li Mu raised his head and said, To be honest, this book is very useful to me. If you have any needs in the future, Li Mu will definitely repay you. He not only gave him the book, but also saved his life. In his heart, her position was equal to that of the monk. He shook her head and said, I gave you this book to thank you for what you did for Lin Wan, not for you to repay me. The Bay of Clearwater is remote and no one can be seen all year round. If you have the heart, you can come here and chat with me when you have the time. Tell me about the outside world and I will be very happy. Li Mu smiled and said, Of course. Then it's a deal. He smiled and said, After you go back, help me inquire about a person. Li Mu asked, Who? He said, His name is Cui Ming. 20 years ago, he was the county magistrate of Yangqiu. There were many people with the same name and surname, so it was naturally difficult to find out. However, there should only be one person who was the county magistrate of Yangqiu. It could be found in the residence of the county government. Li Mu nodded and said, I will help you find out when I go back. He used an illusion to hide the small house by the river where she lived. She sent Li Mu out and said, If you meet a strong enemy in the future that you can't deal with, you can lead him here. As long as you are close to the Bay of Clearwater, I will be able to sense it. Ghost cultivators in the spirit realm were considered strong in the entire North County. Li Mu's greatest gain this time was not the other half of the Taoist book, but that he had gained another backer. They walked to the place where Li Mu had fought the lizard spirit. On the ground, there was a charred lizard and a bag. He did not know what the bag was made of, but it was not damaged even after being struck by the heavenly thunder. Li Mu picked up the bag. "Su," he said, "it looks like the sorcerer's soul-nourishing bag. It should contain the souls he captured." Li Mu wanted to release the souls, but when he opened the bag, a cloud of black fog suddenly surged out of the bag. The black fog circled in the air and turned into a ghost figure. It laughed and said, "Damn snake, I'm out. Last time you caught me off guard. If you have the ability, catch me again." While laughing wildly, it bent down and looked at the ground. At first glance, it saw a familiar figure. The moment it saw Li Mu, its laughter stopped abruptly. It said in shock, "Why is it you again?" Chapter 38. Li Mu was taken aback when he saw the wraith again. Following that, he thought of something and immediately said, "Miss Su, catch it. Don't let it escape." The moment the wraith recognized Li Mu, it recalled the lightning bolt that alarmed him. Without any time to think, it immediately transformed into a mist and fled into the distance. But this time it did not escape. Su-hee's figure vanished from where she stood and instantly appeared in front of the mist. She reached into the mist and quickly grabbed a ghostly figure. It was a young man. His face was filled with horror. The way he looked at Su, he was 100 times more horrified than when he looked at Li Mu. The only thing he feared about the young man was the lightning bolt, but the white-clothed woman in front of him made him feel fear from the depths of his soul. Su-hee glanced at the wraith and looked at Li Mu again. She asked, "Do you know each other?" "Yes." Li Mu walked over with a smile and said, "I have a few important questions to ask him." The wraith trembled and said with a trembling voice, "I was the one who offended you in the past. You are a magnanimous person. Please forgive me and treat me like a fart." Li Mu first guided the fear out of him before asking, "Back then, how did you know that I didn't have 7 physical souls?" Li Mu had never figured it out. The 7 physical souls were different from the 3 spiritual souls. The soul belonged to the body, and without cultivating to the middle 3 realms, it was impossible to see through the physical souls. Even Su-hee could not tell. Li Qing needed to make a judgment based on Li Mu's numerous symptoms. How could a puny wraith have such ability? I'll talk. The evil spirit quickly said, "This little ghost was originally just a Een spirit, living in a cave under the bridge. One day, 2 wraiths were fighting on the bridge. I don't know what happened, but they both perished. This little ghost absorbed their remnant souls and increased my cultivation. I also gained some memories. In the memories of one of the wraiths, there was a divine ability called Heaven's Eye. After this little ghost learned it, he could see through a person's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls." Li Mu looked at it and asked, "Do you think I'm gullible? How can there be such a divine ability? Do you believe that I'll strike you with lightning?" "There really is." The wraith panicked. "If you don't believe me, I'll tell you. You'll know when you try it." In fact, it was not that Li Mu did not believe it. The earliest divine abilities and spells were also created by the seniors of Tao. Even now, there were often amazing people who created their own divine abilities and even Tao techniques. Li Mu wanted to get this divine ability from the wraith's mouth for free. After being frightened by Li Mu, the wraith spilled the beans from a bamboo tube and told him everything it knew. Li Mu was initially worried that his mana was not enough. After trying it, he discovered that this divine ability called Heaven's Eye did not have a high requirement for mana. It was just a magical use of mana. With a short incantation, it could be used. After using Heaven's Eye, the world changed in Li Mu's eyes. The wraith's body was surrounded by Yin Qi. It was obvious that it was a wraith. Li Mu looked at Su-hee and found that she was still the same as before. There was no change in her body. Thinking about it, it was probably because his cultivation was too low that he could not see through the existence of a person whose cultivation was much higher than his. Su-hee looked at him and asked, "What's wrong with your 7 souls?" At the mention of this, Li Mu was a little troubled. he said. It should have been taken away by some evil thing. I'm thinking of a way to reform it. I remember that the books mentioned that it's much harder to reform the 7 souls than to refine them. If you don't succeed, you'll really die and your soul will scatter. Suhi looked at him and suddenly said, "Why don't you become a ghost cultivator? With my help, I guarantee that you'll enter the middle realm in 20 to 30 years. Li Mu shook his head firmly. I'm not married yet. What's wrong with that? Suhi smiled and said, even if you become a ghost cultivator, you can find a female ghost and cultivate your soul. After you enter the middle realm, you'll be able to reform your body at any time and you'll be no different from a living person. If possible, Li Mu still wanted to consider a human woman as his wife. Even if a ghost cultivator could reform his body, he was still a ghost. He was not Ning Kaichen and could not accept a life and death friendship. Before Li Mu answered, the wraith asked tentatively, "Can I go now?" "Who said you can go?" Li Mu glanced at it and looked at Suhi. He said, "This ghost tried to kill me twice before. Today it fell into my hands. Instead of using thunder to strike it and enforce justice on behalf of heaven, it's better to let Miss Su swallow its soul to improve your cultivation." No, no, no. The wraith was so scared that its body became a little illusory. It begged for mercy. "Miss, please spare me. We're all ghosts. Why should ghosts make things difficult for ghosts?" Li Mu took the opportunity to harvest its fear. This level of wraith had a huge amount of emotional power. It was much more efficient than Li Mu absorbing it from ordinary people. It was a pity that although this ghost's cultivation was much deeper than Lin Wan's, its emotions were far inferior. The main reason was that Lin Wan's death was caused by Zhao Yong. Her obsession and resentment were all related to Zhao Yong. Therefore, when Li Mu killed Zhao Yong, she burst out with a huge amount of gratitude. As for this evil spirit, it was nothing more than a coward who was afraid of death. It was worried that Suhi would swallow its soul, so the fear it generated was not strong. Amitabha. As Li Mu continued to harvest the wraith's fear, he suddenly heard a familiar Buddhist chant. Li Mu turned around and saw a monk holding an alms bowl in one hand and a staff in the other. He slowly walked over. It was Xuandu. Xuandu slowly walked closer. He looked at the wraith and said, "This poor monk hasn't succeeded in converting you and you're in a hurry to leave. This poor monk had to look for you." When the wraith saw Xuandu, it was stunned for a moment before it immediately shouted, "Monk, take me in. I won't run anymore. Let me listen to you chanting scriptures. I like listening to you chanting scriptures." Amitabha, good, good. If I hear it, look, I can even recite it. Quickly convert me, quickly convert me. Xuandu walked in front of Li Mu and asked with a smile, "Young benefactor, can this wraith be converted by this poor monk? Last time, this poor monk accidentally let it escape. This time, this poor monk will watch over it carefully." Xuandu had saved his life. Since he asked, Li Mu nodded and said, "Then I'll leave it to you." Xuandu glanced at the wraith and said, "Evil creature, why aren't you coming in yet?" The wraith was ecstatic. It turned into a black fog and entered the alms bowl in his hand. Xuandu looked at Li Mu with a surprised gaze and said, "A few days ago, when this poor monk met you, you lost your 7 souls. I didn't expect you to condense the corpse dog in just a few days. It seems that you must be helping those in need and doing good deeds." Good. Good. Xuandu's eyesight amazed Li Mu. Li Qing was right. He was at least a Buddhist cultivator of the 3rd realm. Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm a bailiff. It's my duty to punish the strong and uphold justice." Xuandu smiled kindly and looked at Suhi. Li Mu was worried that he would become addicted to exorcising the wraith. With her stubborn personality, the two of them would definitely fight. He hurriedly explained, "This is Miss Su. Although she has a Yin spirit body, she has never harmed anyone." Amitabha. Xuandu chanted the name of Buddha and said, "Mrs. Mana is not inferior to this poor monk's. I hope you can keep your original heart and do good. Don't harm the world." Suhi was still disgusted with other men. She snorted and said, "Monk, Mind your own business. Xuandu was not angry. He looked at Li Mu again. After looking him up and down several times, he said curiously, "We haven't seen each other for a few days. Why is the Buddhist aura on your body so strong?" Li Mu explained, "Maybe it's because of the Buddhist beads that you gave me." Speaking of the Buddhist beads, Li Mu felt a little distressed. In the process of the stalemate with the lizard spirit, the medium for him to use the Buddhist magic had been destroyed. No. Xuandu shook his head and said, "The Buddhist beads are just external objects. I think you are fated with Buddha and are born with wisdom. I wonder if you are willing to become a monk and convert to Buddhism." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "No, no." Xuandu did not insist. He just took out a yellowed book from his arms and handed it to Li Mu. He said, "This scripture is for you. If you change your mind in the future, you can come to the Jinshan temple to find me." It was impossible to change his mind. Li Mu was very satisfied with the quality of his hair. When he was about to refuse, he saw Su He give him a look. Li Mu immediately understood. He took the scripture and said, "Thank you, Master. Reciting this scripture often can help you understand reason and wisdom, eliminate karma, and purify the six senses." Xuandu nodded slightly and said, "Come, please follow me and recite. This is what I heard." "This is what I heard," Li Mu recited after Xuandu. Suddenly, there was a flash of golden light on his body. However, this golden light was like a firefly compared to the sun when he was reciting the Heart Sutra. Li Mu did not take it seriously at all. However, Xiandu was shocked and muttered, "Little benefactor, you have a great destiny with Buddha. Are you really not willing to convert to Buddha?" Li Mu said without hesitation, "No." Xuandu looked regretful, but he still said, "Since you are not willing, I will not force you. If you change your mind in the future, I will wait for you at the Jinshan temple." Chapter 39. Xuandu took the evil spirit and gave Li Mu the scripture. Seeing that Li Mu was unwilling to convert, he did not force him. Just like last time, he turned around and left. Li Mu held the Buddhist scripture and thought of Su He's eyes that reminded him. He wondered, is there something mysterious about the scripture? Su He looked at the direction that Xuandu left and said, "When Buddhist disciples first start cultivating, they use a certain scripture as the foundation and chant it day and night. If I'm not wrong, that monk wants to use this to test your root of wisdom." Li Mu said, "Root of wisdom? This is just a saying that those monks use to fool fools." Su He said faintly, "The so-called root of wisdom is your talent in cultivating Buddhism. Chanting the scripture is similar to Taoism's guidance. Those with outstanding talent in Taoism can guide qi several times and succeed in drawing qi. It's the same with the basic scripture. Those with outstanding talent in Buddhism only need to chant it a few times and there will be a light of Buddha. Those with average talent will need a few days. Those without talent will just chant it in vain." Su He looked at Li Mu with a strange look and said, "You only chanted one sentence and there was a light of Buddha. Obviously, you have an extremely high talent in cultivating Buddhism, but you cultivate Taoism." Li Mu himself did not believe that he had any talent in Buddhism. It was most likely because of the Heart Sutra. However, this was not what he cared about. Li Mu looked at Su He and asked the question he was most concerned about. "Can Buddhism and Taoism be cultivated at the same time?" "Of course you can." Su He said, "If it's other cultivation methods, it may not work. But Taoism cultivates the dantian and Buddhism cultivates the body. The two do not conflict. It's just that it's not easy to cultivate. Just the path of cultivation is already very difficult. Very few people cultivate Buddhism and Taoism at the same time. Don't be too greedy." It was not that Li Mu was greedy. It was just that Buddhism and Taoism each had their strengths and weaknesses. If he cultivated both at the same time, he could learn from each other's strengths and weaknesses. When fighting with others, he would have more trump cards to protect himself. If Li Mu only cultivated Taoism or Buddhism, he would not have been able to last until Su He arrived in the fight with the lizard spirit. He did not have to cultivate Buddhism to a high level. As long as he had a little Buddhist mana, he could use part of the power of the Heart Sutra. When he met with demons and ghosts, he could both attack and defend, providing double protection. The beginning cultivation of Buddhism was simpler than Taoism. One only needed to recite the scriptures, while the other needed to cultivate the soul painstakingly. However, this did not mean that the cultivation of Buddhism was easier than that of Taoism. The lower three levels of Taoism, soul refining, soul concentrating, and spirit concentrating, were to build the foundation for later cultivation. Buddhism's beginning cultivation was easy, but the difficult part was the cultivation of the heart. The characteristic of easy at first and difficult at last was suitable for Li Mu. After all, he originally walked the path of Taoism. He did not want to cultivate Buddhism to a high level. After keeping the Taoist books and Buddhist scriptures, Li Mu bid farewell to Su He and walked along the official road to the county. The Bay of Clearwater was not far from the county. Li Mu often walked, and it would take about an hour. If he knew how to draw the spirit travel talisman, he could save a lot of time. Unfortunately, he only knew a few Fulu. With his current low level of mana, he could draw even fewer. The spirit travel talisman required a soul concentrating realm cultivation to draw. Currently, Li Mu was unable to do it. The battle with the lizard spirit was a blow to Li Mu's head. In the past, his cultivation was low. He relied on his thunder technique to restrain demons and ghosts. He did not care about demons and ghosts. The result was that if Su He did not appear, his body would have been eaten by the lizard spirit. Even his soul would have been devoured. This dangerous experience reminded Li Mu that he was a newbie who had just stepped into the cultivation world. Before he had absolute power, he must be careful. After returning home, Li Mu threw all the miscellaneous matters to the back of his mind and focused on the soul-concentrating realm. He had already condensed the first soul, Dog Corpse. The second soul was the third soul, Sparrow Shade. Sparrow Shade was born from sorrow. Sorrow, grief, mourning, pity. They were all part of sorrow. How could he make others feel these emotions? Theoretically speaking, writing a book was the easiest way to mobilize the emotions of most people. Once the readers were immersed in the story, they would feel joy, anger, sadness, or sadness according to the plot. The more popular the novel, the more readers, the more powerful the emotions. But to condense the soul-concentrating realm through this method, it was difficult. Li Mu needed to be face-to-face with someone to absorb their emotions. Beyond a certain distance, the art of inducement would be useless. Although this method did not work, the general idea was correct. Li Mu followed this train of thought and quickly came up with a solution. Soon, Li Mu arrived at the entrance of the Yunyan Pavilion. The Yunyan Pavilion was a chain store. It did not only sell books. To be exact, it was a brand. It had a bookstore, a music studio, a theater, and a tea house. The bookstore was next to the tea house, opposite the tea house was the music studio, and next to the music studio was the theater. The four shops were all called the Yunyan Pavilion. The popular novels in the bookstore would be interpreted by the storytellers in the tea house. The music studio would arrange the music and adapt it into a play in the theater. Li Mu could not help but admire the shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion. This kind of advanced concept of pan-entertainment was rare in this world. If he had the chance in the future, he would get to know someone with such foresight. Li Mu stepped into the bookstore. The middle-aged shopkeeper, who was calculating the accounts at the counter, looked up and immediately ran out. He asked eagerly, "Young master, why are you here? The Strange Stories from a Chinese studio is still in its infancy. It will be a few days before it can be printed and sold." Li Mu shook his head and said, "That's not why I'm here." The shopkeeper said, "Young master, if there's anything else, please let me know." The shopkeeper's attitude made Li Mu feel a little strange. According to his investigation, the bookstore's attitude towards the authors under it was not very friendly. After all, those poor scholars would delay their chapters every 2 to 3 days. The shopkeepers of the major bookstores wanted nothing more than to hold a knife to their heads and force them to write. It was very rare for them to be so friendly. However, If the shopkeeper's attitude was good, Li Mu would not feel uncomfortable. He smiled and said, "There is indeed something I would like to ask of the shopkeeper." After all, this was a man that the lady had her eyes on. The shopkeeper could not be negligent. He quickly said, "Young master, please speak." Li Mu asked, "I wonder if the tea house next door is lacking storytellers." The shopkeeper asked, "Young master wants to tell stories?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I want to try." Telling stories and writing novels had certain similarities. Although the audience of storytellers was limited to one area of the tea house, they were only separated by a curtain. Li Mu could easily guide their emotions. When the shopkeeper heard Li Mu's request, he immediately said, "I will arrange it for you immediately." No matter how slow Li Mu was, at this moment he realized that something was wrong. Since the last time, the shopkeeper's attitude towards him had been excessively good. Not only did he give him special treatment when he published a book, but now he was even fulfilling all of his requests. Those who did not know would think that Li Mu was the shopkeeper. He looked at the shopkeeper and asked, "Shopkeeper, are you hiding something from me?" The shopkeeper's heart thumped. He smiled apologetically and said, "How is that possible?" When he spoke, his eyes drifted and his expression was nervous. This made Li Mu certain of his suspicions. He asked, "What are you hiding from me?" The shopkeeper stuttered and did not dare to raise his head to look at him. "All right, shopkeeper Huang, you can leave." At this moment, a familiar voice that Li Mu heard suddenly came from above. Lu Hanyen came down from upstairs. Looking at Li Mu, she said, "If you have any questions, just ask me. Don't make things difficult for shopkeeper Huang." Li Mu looked at her in astonishment, then suddenly said, "So it's you?" When Lu Hanyen came down from upstairs, Li Mu understood everything. He understood why the shopkeeper suddenly chased after him when he had already rejected his manuscript. His attitude changed 180 degrees, and he approved his manuscript without any hesitation. Furthermore, he gave him so much preferential treatment. It turned out that the yen of the Union Pavilion was Lu Hanyen's yen. Li Mu thought that he was already earning money with his own efforts. He did not expect that he was still relying on Lu Hanyen to be pitiful. In other words, he was living off a woman. Although there was a trace of discomfort in his heart, but it could not be denied that living off a woman was quite good. Chapter 40. Union Pavilion. The shopkeeper brought over some good tea. After the two sat down, Lu Hanyen looked at Li Mu with some confusion and asked, "Why did you want to become a storyteller?" No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't connect a bailiff to a storyteller. Li Mu couldn't tell her that he wanted to condense the sparrow shade as soon as possible and regain his masculinity. So he could only say, "A bailiff's monthly salary is 500 coins. It's only enough to eat." Lu Hanyen froze for a moment, then she remembered something and said apologetically, "Sorry, I forgot that you still have to help me draw talismans. How about I give you some money?" "No need." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "If it wasn't for you, no bookstore would be willing to print my books. You've already taken care of me so much, so how can I take your money?" Lu Hanyen asked, "But you have to be a bailiff, write a book, and tell a story. Can you do it all?" "It's okay." Li Mu smiled and said, "If it's not convenient for Union Pavilion, I'll go somewhere else to ask." Lu Hanyen was worried that he would misunderstand and said helplessly, "If you're willing, you can try it here. I'll give you 10 taels of silver every month. The rewards from the customers will all be yours." In her heart, Li Mu had clearly become someone who had to work 3 jobs because of the pressure to survive. And part of this pressure was given to him by her. Li Mu shook his head and said, "I've already asked around. The best storyteller here only gets 2 taels of silver a month. The rewards from the customers can only be split 50%. Lady Lu, I know you're taking care of me, but I still want to earn money through my own efforts and not rely on others' charity." Lu Hanyen was worried that her insistence would hurt Li Mu's fragile self-esteem, so she could only nod and say, "Okay then." It wasn't that Li Mu wasn't moved by the salary of 10 taels of silver, Who wouldn't want money? It was just that he owed Lu Hanyan too much. If he calmly accepted her help, what was the difference between being her sugar daddy? Although there was always a voice in his heart telling him to say yes to her so that he wouldn't have to work so hard. His pride as a man won in the end. Lu Hanyan stood up and said, "Wait here for a moment. I'll arrange it." Of the 4 shops in the Union Pavilion, the music shop had the best business, followed by the opera house, the bookstore, and finally the tea house. After all, the people who came to this kind of place were all young people who had time and money to spare. Watching beautiful girls singing and dancing was much more interesting than listening to the old man talking to himself. However, storytellers also had a lot of fans. When Li Mu walked into the tea house, he saw more than a dozen customers drinking tea while listening to the old man on the stage. Listening to the story was free, but most of the customers would order a pot of tea and a few side dishes when listening to the story. Most of the tea house's income came from this. Occasionally, there would be generous customers who would take out their money pouches and tip the storyteller. The tea house would deduct half of the money, and the rest would be the storyteller's extra income. After a while, the old man finished his story and a customer shouted from below, "It's still early today. Tell us another story." At this time, a waiter walked up to the old man's ear and whispered a few words. The old man stood up and clasped his hands to the audience. He smiled and said, "This old man isn't feeling well today, so I'll stop here. Today, a new storyteller came to our shop. Why don't you all listen to his story?" When the old man finished speaking, there was a commotion among the customers below the stage. "A new person? What's so good about a new person? Among these people, only you, old man song, have a good story. Let's go, let's go." After the old man stepped down from the stage, several people immediately paid the bill and left. The tea house manager looked at Lu Hanyan and said awkwardly, "Miss, this?" Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "Continue listening." The few customers who stayed either had their tea just served or had not finished the side dishes they ordered. Although they were still sitting there, their eyes moved away from the stage. It was not until 2 of the waiter moved a screen to the stage that the crowd glanced at it in surprise. What's going on? Why is it blocked? So mysterious. What kind of gimmick is this? Hurry up and drink. After finishing this pot of tea, we'll listen to music on the other side. Li Mu came up from the backstage and sat on the chair behind the screen. As a bailiff, he patrolled the streets every day. Not everyone in Yangqiu County knew him, but at least most of the people on Weiyang Street were familiar with him. Therefore, he asked Lu Hanyan for a screen to block his view. Sitting on the chair behind the screen, Li Mu cleared his throat and said, "The story I'm going to tell today is called Transforming into a Butterfly." During the previous dynasty in the Zhu family manor in Yangqiu County of the North region, there was a woman named Zhu Yingtai. She was beautiful and intelligent. She learned poetry from her brother since she was young and liked to read. However, there was no good teacher in her family and she wanted to study in Zhongjuan. In order to harvest these people's sorrow, Li Mu told an adapted version of The Lovers of the Liang Dynasty. As one of the 4 great love tragedies in ancient times, The Lovers of the Liang Dynasty was really sad to the bone. Li Mu was 12 or 13 years old and had his first awakening of love. When he did not know what love was, he cried his eyes out when he watched The Lovers of the Liang Dynasty for the first time today. Even if the people present were all fierce men, as long as they still had human emotions in their hearts, Li Mu could harvest their sorrow. On the way to study, Yingtai met Liang Shanbua, a scholar who also went to Zhongjuan to study. The 2 of them hit it off at first sight and enjoyed each other's study. On the grass bridge pavilion, they used soil as incense and became brothers. Below the stage, the few guests who were drinking tea gradually slowed down. A woman dressed as a man? Interesting. You can't even tell? How flat is the woman's chest? Although this new storyteller's skills were not as good as the other storytellers, his story was quite interesting. It was fresh and unconventional. After listening to a paragraph, they actually listened to it. A series of funny stories caused by the female lead dressing as a man also made the few people present smile. The two guests who were about to leave silently asked the waiter to refill the pot of tea. Interesting. This story is novel and quite funny. It's funny, but it doesn't seem to have anything to do with transforming into a butterfly. The name is off topic. Everyone listened and discussed with great interest, until Li Mu told them that when Liang Shanbo went to the Zhu family to propose, he learned that the Zhu family's father had already betrothed Yingtai to Ma Wenkai, the son of the South County's county chief. The happy marriage had already become a shadow. The two of them met on the platform, looked at each other with tears in their eyes, and left in a sad manner. The faces of those guests gradually became serious, but they also knew that this was the usual routine of storytellers. They would first suppress their desires, then suppress their desires. The subsequent development of the story would definitely be that the two of them would overcome various obstacles and live happily together. However, behind the screen, the storyteller's voice came slowly. Shanbo fell ill from depression and died not long after. When Yingtai heard the bad news of Shanbo, she swore to die. Dead? Dead? This is impossible. His ghost must still be waiting. What will Zhu Yingtai do? Are the two of them going to fall in love with each other? Below the stage, everyone looked anxious. Lu Hanyan's heart also tightened. At this moment, Li Mu stood behind the screen and frowned slightly. Just as he told the most tragic part of Liang Zhu and wanted to guide everyone's grief, he realized that he could not guide any of it. He originally thought that these people were really heartless until he used his heaven's eye to look through the screen. Only then did he realize that almost everyone was filled with a faint sense of sorrow. However, this sorrow could not be guided by him. Li Mu did not use his heavenly eye divine ability, so he could not see anything. To be able to hear the music he was incomparably familiar with in this unfamiliar world. At this moment, the satisfaction and joy in Li Mu's heart could not be described with words. Not long after the music stopped, Lu Hanyan walked in again and asked Li Mu, "Is there a complete score for this song?" "Not at the moment." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Wait until I think of a complete one. I'll let you try to hum it again." The fulu that Li Qing gave him last time had lost its effect. He had to find a chance to ask for another one. At that time, he would be able to hum the complete song of Liangzhu. "I have an idea." Lu Hanyan looked at him and said in a negotiating tone, "In the next few days, we can let them talk more about butterfly transformation. If the story of butterfly transformation is popular, we can let the bookstore publish it as a book. The music house and theater can also use it as a prototype to compose a song or make it into a play." It had to be said that Lu Hanyan was very business-minded. Now, she wanted to turn Liangzhu into an IP and develop the copyright for multiple lines. Li Mu wanted the 7 emotions. Although he did not care about its commercial value, Lu Hanyan's words made him think of a way to collect grief. Since everyone's grief was directed at Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai, Li Mu could not absorb it. But what if he was Liang Shanbo? "You can decide for yourself." Li Mu looked at Lu Hanyan and said, "I only have one request." Lu Hanyan said, "Don't worry, you will be satisfied with the reward." Li Mu shook his head and said, "It's not about the money." Lu Hanyan was confused. "Then what is it?" Li Mu said seriously, "After the story of butterfly transformation is made into a play, I want to act as Liang Shanbo." Lu Hanyan said, "You know how to act?" Li Mu, "No, but I can learn." Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "A quarter of an hour on stage is 10 years of work off stage. You can't learn it?" Li Mu suddenly sighed and said, "Actually, I have a dream of acting since I was young. I just want to stand on the stage of my dreams before I die." "Okay. Okay." Lu Hanyan's heart tightened and she quickly said, "Isn't it just acting? I'll let you act." Telling a lie often required countless lies to cover it up. Li Mu himself did not remember when he started to lie in front of Lu Hanyan without blushing and without skipping a beat. Others treated him with sincerity, but he covered it up. This made Li Mu feel very uncomfortable. He could only comfort himself that other men lied to girls for their bodies. He used Lu Hanyan's sympathy to condense his soul and save his life. He did not covet her body, nor did he want to cheat her of her money. This could only be regarded as a white lie. After comforting himself like this, he became more at ease. Chapter 42. Lu Hanyan did not return to the Yunyan Pavilion. She stayed for lunch. Ever since she found out that the youth-retaining talisman really worked, she stopped dieting. She paid for it, so it was not considered freeloading. Moreover, half of the dishes on the table were made by her. Li Mu was very willing to share some of the food with her. Besides, Lu Hanyan's culinary skills were several levels higher than his, so he would not be polite. The happiest was of course Wan Wan. The food in her bowl was piled up to the tip. She focused on eating without saying a word. Lu Hanyan ate in a more ladle-like manner. She would only speak to Li Mu after swallowing the food in her mouth. Then it's settled. You will write the initial script of Butterfly Transformation. When the time comes, I will get someone to change it into a play. As for the profits, I will give you enough for the play. As for the book, I suggest you share the profits with the bookstore. You can do as you see fit. Li Mu was not as interested in money as Zhang Shan. What he cared about was how to capture the audience's emotions. Lu Hanyan returned to the store after lunch. She needed to plan a series of matters related to the adaptation of Liangzhu. Li Mu first practiced swordsmanship in the yard for a while. He had to familiarize himself with the sword manual Li Qing gave him first. Spells were powerful, but one's skills had to be able to keep up. In a fight between low-level cultivators, the level of cultivation was not the deciding factor. Fist and foot skills were equally important. In the middle three realms, cold weapons and ordinary fist and foot skills were of little use in a fight. After practicing a few times, Li Mu returned to his room and sat cross-legged on the bed. He took out the basic scripture that Xuandu gave him and began to chant in a low voice. The basic cultivation of Buddhism was much simpler than that of Taoism. Li Mu could feel that when he chanted this scripture, there was an extremely weak fluctuation of the power of heaven and earth around him. Others might not be able to sense it, but he was someone who frequently courted death, who knew how many times he had suffered from the backlash of the power of the heavens and earth. Thus, he was extremely sensitive to the power of the heavens and earth. This meant that the basic sutras of Buddhism did not belong to the category of supernatural powers. Instead, they belonged to the category of Taoist techniques. They were in line with the laws of the world and were almost equivalent to the Heart Sutra that had been weakened countless times. After reciting a few sentences, Li Mu suddenly opened his eyes and a thought appeared in his mind. Since chanting this basic sutra could increase one's magic power, then what about chanting the Heart Sutra? Li Mu immediately put down the Dharma Sutra and began to chant the Heart Sutra in a low voice. As expected, he discovered that the Buddhist mana in his body flowed much faster. This meant that chanting the Heart Sutra would speed up the growth of his magic power. The only bad thing was that when he chanted the Heart Sutra, a halo of light would appear on his body. It was like the sun, shining brightly. In order to not be discovered by others, he could only cultivate silently in his own bedroom, which made him quite vexed. Li Mu did not know if other monks were like this. If there was a chance in the future, he would have to ask Xuandu. In the next few days, the county office was peaceful. Nothing major happened. Li Mu's area of jurisdiction was even more peaceful. Not even a small public security case occurred. Li Mu spent most of his time in the guard room. He painstakingly studied the only spell that he could learn in the soul refining stage other than the Dao Yin, the rock leap technique. Although it was called a spell, it was actually a light body technique. After learning this technique, one's body would be as light as a swallow. It would not be a problem to fly over roofs and vault over walls. It would not be a problem to walk over a widow's wall at night. It sounded the same as the Qinggong in Wuxia novels. After careful comparison, Li Mu discovered that this was Qinggong. It was just that in Wuxia novels, Qinggong required internal energy. Here, it required magic power. If there was a fundamental difference between the two, it would be that Qigong required at least 10 years or even tens of years of cultivation. But Li Mu only used 3 days to master the trick of the rock leap technique. He stood in his own courtyard. With just a light jump, he would be able to jump to Lu Hanyan's courtyard. In addition, if he used the rock leap technique to run at full speed, although the speed was not as fast as the spirit travel talisman, it was still comparable to a horse carriage. The bailiff's daily patrols were actually very free. Many people habitually patrolled one round and then did their own things. For example, Zhang Shan liked to go to the casino to gamble. Li Si randomly walked into a brothel on the street. When it was time to eat, he was even more free. After Li Mu returned home and changed his clothes, he secretly went to the Yunyan Pavilion. Yunyan Pavilion Tea House. In the past, at this time, the tea house only had a few customers. But today it was almost full. This was because a new storyteller had come to the tea house a few days ago. Although this storyteller was not old, the stories he told were very novel and unique. His storytelling skills were very rusty at first, but after 2 or 3 days he suddenly became very mature. It was as if he did not lose to the few old storytellers in the tea house. In just a few days he had attracted a lot of listeners. However, although this storyteller's stories were good, there was a problem that made people gnash their teeth in anger. However, when he returned to the bay of clear water, he saw an unbelievable scene. Everyone held their breaths and waited quietly for him to continue. Li Mu was silent for a moment before he spoke again. If you want to know what will happen, tomorrow at the same time, see you there. Shameless bastard. This again. What did that old man see? Get the hell out here. I have plenty of money. Li Mu took the opportunity to absorb a wave of anger. When he escaped from the backstage, he found a group of people aggressively blocking the back door. At first, he was stunned. Then his face showed anger. He asked, "Did you see that bastard?" The leader frowned and asked, "He's not inside?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No, I just came out. He shouldn't have run away yet. It's not too late to go in and block him. That bastard always stops at interesting places. Don't let me catch him. If I catch him, I'll break his legs. P.S. Thank you to Tong Tang's leader. Tong Tang's Harry Potter, The Invincible Genius, is still being serialized. Readers who like it can take a look. Harry Potter's harem is a masterpiece that cannot be missed. Chapter 43. Everyone swarmed in through the back door of the Yunyan Pavilion. Li Mu strolled leisurely towards the yamen. In the past few days, he had encountered some problems in his cultivation. He had thought that he would be able to condense the second spirit very quickly after finding a way to collect anger. However, the truth was that he had collected an enormous amount of anger, but it was difficult to refine it. Anger was also one of the 7 emotions, but it was several times harder to refine than joy. Li Mu did not know if this was normal. He had to ask Li Qing at the yamen. In the Yangqiu County government, Li Qing was not surprised at all after hearing his question. She said, "The difficulty of refining the 7 spirits is not the same. Corpse dog, sparrow shade, and fetid lung are the following spirits. They are much easier to refine than the concealed arrow, seizing thief, and filth removal. This is because the 4 emotions of joy, sorrow, love, and lust are the following emotions, while the 3 emotions of anger, fear, and evil are the opposing emotions. The difficulty of refining the opposing emotions is several times greater than the following emotions." Li Mu roughly understood. Gratitude, pity, love, and lust were all positive emotions that were easy to refine. On the other hand, anger, fear, and disgust were negative and passive emotions that were difficult to refine. As such, the difficulty of his path to soul solidification immediately increased by several levels compared to what he had expected. Li Qing only explained the different emotions to him, but did not give Li Mu a solution. This meant that there was no shortcut in this matter. Fortunately, every time he condensed a spirit, one of his body's functions would be restored. As long as he condensed 4 of the 7 spirits, his body would undergo a qualitative change, and he would not die in half a year. Li Mu had already condensed one spirit. He only needed to condense 3 more spirits to resolve the urgency of half a year's time. Love, hate, and lust were difficult to collect. Li Mu could only choose anger, sorrow, and fear. However, anger and fear were both rebellious emotions, so it was difficult to refine them. As a result, the half a year's time was a little tense. Don't worry too much. Li Qing looked at him and comforted him. No matter how difficult it is to refine anger, 1 month is enough. You need to think about how to collect the other 2 emotions in this half a year. Xiao Li Mu's story collection would take another half a month at most, and Li Mu would be able to collect enough anger to form the second soul. As for the way to obtain sadness and fear, he already had a preliminary idea. Drawing out the 7 emotions in other people's bodies would not harm their bodies. It would only exhaust their stamina. Although it was a little immoral, Li Mu had no other choice in order to survive. If there was a case of monsters causing trouble in a certain place, according to this book, the county government could judge what kind of monster was behind the case, what the monster's characteristics were, what magic it had, and how to restrain it. After the investigation, the county government could make appropriate countermeasures. Seeing the book in Li Mu's hand, Old Wang hurried over and said, "This book is very useful. You can't sell it. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to investigate cases in the future." Li Mu handed the book to him and asked casually, "Old Wang, do you have any books about Taoist soul refining? You need them for your cultivation. I'll help you find them." Old Wang took the records of monsters in the 10 continents, as if it was a treasure, and limped back to his room on duty. Li Mu followed behind him and watched Old Wang rummage through the rows of bookshelves. After a long time, he pulled out a book from the corner and threw it to Li Mu. He said, "See if it says." Li Mu blew the dust off the book. After opening it, he found that the book really did contain the incantations and methods of soul refining. However, this book was written for cultivators with complete 7 spirits. For people like Li Mu who needed to condense their spirits first, it was not useful at all. He did not find a way to quickly refine anger from this book. Li Mu threw it aside and sighed. Are there really no shortcuts to cultivation? Who said there are no shortcuts to cultivation? Old Wang glanced at him and said, "There are many shortcuts to cultivation. However, the shortcuts you can think of are all written in the laws of the Great Show. Some people think that their soul refining is too slow, so they steal the souls of others. Some people can't condense their spirits, so they grab the souls of others to supplement it. As long as you have the courage, there are shortcuts everywhere in cultivation." Chapter 44. Stealing people's souls for cultivation was heretical cultivation. Everyone in the cultivation world had the right to punish this. Even the heretical cultivation of the 6th realm, Dongxian, could not escape death, let alone a lowly constable like him. Li Mu looked at Old Wang and said helplessly, "Can't you find a shortcut outside of the laws of the Great Zhou?" Old Wang scratched his sparse head and said, "Let me guess. When you refined concealed arrow, seizing thief, or filth removal, did you discover that it wasn't as easy as refining dead dog and sparrow shade?" Li Mu said in surprise, "How did you know?" Old Wang didn't know that he had lost all 7 of his souls. What he needed to do now was to condense the soul and not refine it. But he guessed that this was more or less the predicament Li Mu was facing. Old Wang chuckled and said, "Even if I haven't eaten pork, I've seen pigs run. Although I haven't cultivated, which one of you cultivators didn't do this? These years, the cultivators in the Yamen come and go in waves. I've seen many of them. If you want to refine these 3 rebellious souls, there really is a shortcut outside of the law." Li Mu hurriedly asked, "What shortcut?" Old Wang might not have cultivated, but he had lived long enough and seen many things. When it came to cultivation, he probably knew more than Li Qing. "You can't steal people's souls, but can't you steal demon souls?" Old Wang gave him a look and said, "Do you think that the disciples of the various Taoist sects who come into the world and slay demons and devils everywhere really have nothing better to do? After killing those demons, they can take their souls and refine them. Isn't that much faster than cultivating by themselves? What old Wang said was a way to speed up cultivation, but in Li Mu's view, stealing demon souls was not much different from stealing people's souls. Li Mu shook his head and said, "People are divided into good and bad people. Demons are also divided into good and evil demons. What's the difference between people who kill demons and steal their souls for their own cultivation and demons who kill demons and steal their souls for their own cultivation? I didn't ask you to kill good monsters." Old Wang glanced at him and said, "You can go kill those evil monsters and take their souls. Not only can you get rid of evil for the people, you can also help your own cultivation, why not?" Li Mu smiled and shook his head. Old Wang said, "You don't want to take the shortcut anymore?" Li Qing's warning appeared in Li Mu's mind. She said, "People's desires are endless. There is no heretical cultivation in this world. There are only cultivators who want to take the shortcut. Perhaps what they thought at the beginning was to kill evil demons and get rid of evil for the people while helping their own cultivation. But after getting used to this shortcut, they can no longer bear the normal speed of cultivation." They could increase their cultivation by sucking the blood essence of living creatures and refining the blood qi. However, demons that knew how to suck blood to cultivate were at least in the embryonic transformation realm. Their intelligence was not much different from that of ordinary humans. They knew that sucking human blood to cultivate was a big taboo. Although their cultivation increased faster, they also died faster. The Great Zhou court had always been ruthless towards such demons. They didn't dare to suck the blood of living people, so they could only suck the blood of domestic animals. This way, even if the people reported it, the yamen wouldn't pay too much attention to it. Li Mu left the yamen and found Li Qing on the street. After explaining the case, the two of them left the county and headed for Zhang village. Chapter 45. Zhang family village was located in the north of Yangqiu County. It was more than 20 miles away from the county. If they were to walk, they would probably need to wait until nightfall to reach there. Fortunately, Li Mu had already learned the rock leap technique. With the divine travel talisman given to him by Li Qing, they arrived at Zhang family village in just half an hour. If Li Mu could cultivate to the divine power or creation realm, he would be able to travel 1,000 miles in a day with his cultivation in the middle three realms. If he cultivated his Taoist techniques to the extreme, he would be able to move the ground in golden light and shrink the ground to an inch. It would not be difficult for him to travel to 10 continents and 3 islands in a day. However, these were too far away for Li Mu. He was very satisfied with his current ability. Although he could not ride the clouds, he could still leap over roofs and vault over walls. He could cover a distance of dozens of feet in a leap. He could barely satisfy his craving to be a hero. When Li Mu and Li Qing arrived at Zhang family village, a few villagers at the entrance of the village hurried forward and asked, "Officers, are you here to catch the evil spirit? We'll know if it's an evil spirit after we see it." Li Mu said, "Where's the place of the incident? Take us there." Under the guidance of a few villagers, the two of them came to a house at the edge of the village. A few dead chickens were lying in the yard. The blood in their bodies had long been sucked dry. There were obvious teeth marks on their necks. If it was just a dead chicken, it could have been bitten by a weasel or a fox. However, if all the blood in their bodies was sucked dry, it was usually done by evil spirits. It was because of this that the yamen sent cultivators to deal with it. Li Qing asked, "Has there been a similar situation before?" A villager hurriedly said, "A few days ago, 2 sheep were bitten to death. The yamen also sent people over and said that they would investigate. After that, there was no news. Chickens and sheep were not of the same size. For example, vampire bats, weasels, and other evil spirits would not choose large livestock because of their size. Only some ferocious beasts or living corpses would attack large livestock like cows and sheep. If it was the latter, the difficulty of this case would be different." Li Mu squatted next to the dead chicken, carefully examining it. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He reached out and took out a strand of yellow hair from the chicken's neck. Li Mu stood up and said, "Boss, look at this." Li Qing glanced at the hair in his hand and said, "It's a monster that has yet to transform." Li Qing took out an immortal guiding talisman and placed the hair and Fu Lu together to form a paper crane. She gently tossed the paper crane into the air, and the paper crane flapped its wings and flew out of the village. Chapter 46. Thank you, Immortal Master. Thank you, Immortal Master. The two weasels knelt on the ground and kowtowed to a human. It looked a little strange, but Li Mu did not care about this. His mind was full of how to explain to Li Qing that he had Buddhist mana. Last time I met the senior monk who saved me. He said that I was fated with Buddha and wanted me to become a monk. I refused him righteously. Then, he gave me a scripture and asked me to read it when I was free. Later, I found that my body could actually glow when I read the scripture. Li Mu looked at Li Qing with a serious face and said, "That's what happened. If you don't believe me, you can go to the Jinshan temple and find Master Xuandu to verify it. I didn't become a monk. I still want to marry a wife in the future." After all, Taoism and Buddhism were two different schools. Moreover, in terms of believers, Buddhism and Taoism faintly opposed each other. He could not let Li Qing misunderstand that he was two-timing. More importantly, he could not let her misunderstand that he had converted to Buddhism and that the world was empty. Li Qing was just a little surprised, but she did not blame or feel dissatisfied. She said, "Buddhism and Taoism are just forms of cultivation. You can choose any path. But for you now, the most important thing is to condense your soul. When the 7 souls have been condensed, you can choose whichever way of cultivation you choose. It is your freedom." Li Mu explained, "I didn't waste too much time. I just thought about it when I was free. I won't become a monk. I can't get married if I'm a monk." After explaining this matter, Li Mu looked at the two weasels again and said, "Although you didn't hurt anyone, you stole the poultry and livestock. You have caused the people of Zhang village to suffer for no reason. You have to compensate them." Of course. The weasel nodded and said, "I don't have the money of humans, but over the years, I have saved some Ganoderma herbs. I wonder if they can be used as a substitute?" It was just a matter of a few chickens and 2 sheep. The medicinal herbs that the 2 spirits had their eyes on were definitely not of a low age. It was more than enough to compensate the villagers for their losses. Li Mu glanced at them and said, "Let's go back to the county government first. As for how to compensate, it's up to the county magistrate to decide. If it was some petty theft within the jurisdiction, Li Mu could settle it by himself. However, since it involved demons and had caused panic among the villagers, it would be more troublesome to deal with the case. Li Mu could not make the decision by himself." The weasel nodded repeatedly. "This little demon will listen to Master Immortal." Li Mu looked back at Li Qing and said, "Chief, it's getting dark. Let's go back." Just as he took a step forward, Li Qing grabbed his wrist. Li Qing held Qing Hong in one hand and said to Li Mu, "Stand behind me." Its steel whip-like tail was even more flexible and powerful. If Li Mu was swept by its tail, even if he did not die, he would have a few broken bones. However, although the tiger demon was ferocious, it did not have any rules when it came to fighting. It relied entirely on the instincts of a wild beast. Although Li Qing looked weak, her swordsmanship was full of tricks. After dozens of moves, the tiger demon was stabbed a few times. If it was not for his thick skin, he would have been killed by Li Qing's sword. Roar! The tiger demon roared again and spat out a cloud of black gas. Li Qing dodged and a Fu Lu flew out of her sleeve. The Fu Lu spontaneously combusted in the air. Suddenly, a strong wind blew and dispersed the cloud of black gas. Roar, roar, roar. The tiger demon roared 3 times in a row. Suddenly, countless shadows flew out from its body. These shadows were in the shape of humans and animals. After flying out of the tiger demon's body, they pounced on Li Qing. The sword in Li Qing's hand danced. Every time she swung her sword, a shadow would be split apart. However, in the next moment, they would reform and continue to pounce on her without fear of death. Li Qing frowned. These shadows were Alien spirits, but for some reason, they seemed to be immortal. They were endless. Although they did not pose much of a threat to her, they were constantly depleting her physical strength and magic power. At this moment, her wrist was suddenly grabbed. "Stand behind me." Li Mu held Li Qing's wrist and walked in front of her. His body emitted a golden light. When the shadows approached the golden light, their bodies would emit black smoke and they would scream. They could only hide far away, not daring to get close. Seeing that these ghostly shadows were useless, the tiger demon took a deep breath and sucked these shadows back into its body. At the same time, the Buddhist light on Li Mu's body slowly dissipated. Of course, he didn't dissipate it on his own accord. It was just that the Heart Sutra consumed too much of his mana. Li Mu's body only cultivated a trace of Buddhist mana that was negligible. At most, it could only last for a few dozen seconds. The tiger demon looked at them coldly. His 2 arms suddenly turned into tiger claws. His incomparably sharp nails shone with a cold light under the moonlight. At this moment, someone patted his shoulder from behind. The tiger demon slapped behind him with his claws, but unexpectedly, he hit nothing. He jerked his head back and looked at the monk standing in front of him. He said angrily, "Where did this wild monk come from?" "Amitabha." The monk made a Buddhist salute with one hand and said, "I am Xuandu from Jinshan Temple. I am not a wild monk." The tiger demon licked his lips and sneered, "It seems that I can eat to my heart's content today." The monk looked up at him with a compassionate expression and said, "Humans have their own Tao, and demons have their own demonic path. I'll destroy your body and soul today." After a long time, a shadow floated out from the tiger demon's body. As soon as it flew into the sky, it was about to escape into the distance. Xuandu stood up and formed a seal with one hand. He pressed down on the void in front of him. In the sky, a golden handprint appeared out of thin air and pressed down on the tiger demon's soul. Li Mu heard a roar that was filled with endless fear and indignation. The tiger demon's soul turned into countless light spots and dissipated. Xuandu waved his sleeves and all the wandering shadows were collected by him. "Amitabha." He put his palms together and whispered, "After we go back, I'll use the Dharma to redeem you and help you reincarnate as soon as possible." Li Mu pursed his dry lips and thought to himself, "This is what a fierce man should be like." At this time, Xuandu had already put on his kasaya and walked to Li Mu and Li Qing. He bowed politely and said, "Fate is really wonderful. Young benefactor, we meet again." Li Mu reacted and immediately said, "Thank you, Master Xuandu, for helping us out." Xuandu smiled and said, "Everyone has the right to kill such a harmful demon." After that, he looked at Li Mu and Li Qing and asked, "I was meditating in the Jinshan Temple just now when I suddenly saw the Buddha's light soaring into the sky. There should be a Buddhist master here. May I ask if you have seen this person?" From the time Li Mu recited the Heart Sutra to the time Xuandu came here, it was at most a minute. It could be seen that this monk's cultivation was profound. Li Mu did not want to expose himself in front of him, so he shook his head and said, "No, we didn't see any monk. Boss, did you see him?" Li Qing glanced at him and shook her head. "No. What a pity." Xuandu sighed softly and said, "The Buddha's light was so strong that it could be clearly seen from 10 miles away. It must be a Buddhist master who passed by. I wanted to ask him about the Dharma." "What a pity! What a pity!" Li Qing glanced at Li Mu again, her eyes full of deep meaning. After Xuandu sighed, he looked at Li Mu again and asked, "I don't know if you have thought about it, Are you willing to convert to Buddhism? Li Mu did not refuse directly this time. After all, Xuandu's performance just now really shocked him. If he could learn this skill, he would not be so embarrassed when he met the lizard spirit that day. He thought for a moment, looked at Xuandu, and asked, "Can I grow my hair if I convert to Buddhism?" Xuandu nodded and said, "Yes, shaving is just the appearance. If you can eliminate your troubles, what's the difference whether you shave or not?" Li Mu asked again, "Can I not be a vegetarian?" Xuandu said, "Wine and meat pass through the intestines, but the Buddha stays in the heart. If there is no Buddha in the heart, fasting and eating vegetarian is useless." Li Mu continued to ask, "Can I marry a wife?" Xuandu shook his head. If Li Mu did not help, it would not have lived for more than 3 days. Li Mu just repaired a little of its foundation. If it wanted to fully recover, it would need to use the light of Buddha a few more times. After the incident with Lin Wan and the weasel's wife, Li Mu vaguely felt that not all light of Buddha had such an effect. The Heart Sutra should have more than one use. It was just that he had not discovered it yet. Xuandu said that the Jinshan temple was not far from here. The three of them walked for half an hour. The temple standing on the mountainside was not big, but it was not small either. Seeing Xuandu return, the two acolytes guarding the gate immediately trotted over and said respectfully, "Martial uncle?" Xuandu said, "These two benefactors need to stay in the temple for a night. Arrange 2 meditation rooms for them." The acolytes looked at Li Mu and Li Qing and nodded repeatedly. Although there was a rule in the temple that female benefactors were not allowed to stay overnight, Martial Uncle Xuandu had never talked about rules. Even the abbot could not do anything about it. Xuandu threw the tiger's corpse on the ground and said, "This tiger demon has done a lot of evil. Carry it in later and put it in the woodshed. Tomorrow, give it to the tailor at the foot of the mountain and ask him to make a tiger skin mattress for the abbot." The weasel stood outside and looked at Li Mu. He said nervously, "Immortal Master, I can't enter the temple. I'll wait outside." As long as there were real Buddhist cultivators in the temple, it would be blessed by the light of Buddha. It would be difficult for demons and ghosts to enter. Even if the weasel couple went in, they would be on tenterhooks. Li Mu nodded and said, "You can go back first. Wait for us here tomorrow morning." He was not worried that the 2 demons would run away. The weasel's wife's foundation had not recovered. If she ran away, it would still be difficult for her to escape. Although the weasel was a demon, he was also affectionate and righteous. He would not run away alone. The acolytes were agile and quickly tidied up 2 clean meditation rooms for them. Li Mu thought that Li Qing would ask him something, but she only told Li Mu to rest early and go back to the yamen early tomorrow morning. Then, she walked into the meditation room next door. After being busy for half a day, Li Mu was already a little tired. After coming to the Jinshan temple, he became energetic again. There was a sandalwood scent in the meditation room, which calmed one's mind. Li Mu's mind was focused on the sky. As he was habitually guiding the practice, he suddenly remembered that this was the holy land of Buddhism. It seemed to be a little offensive to practice Taoist cultivation here. Coincidentally, there was a Buddhist scripture beside the futon. Li Mu took it and casually flipped through a few pages. There were 2 kinds of Buddhist scriptures.